Today's story is about how a chance meeting between two very different people changed their lives forever. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel, leave a like, and write your thoughts in the comments. For every new subscriber, I will donate $1 to charity. Emily was a young woman from a wealthy family, living in a large house on the outskirts of the city. Despite all the comforts and privileges she had, she felt like a failure. School was a constant struggle. No matter how hard she tried, her grades never seemed to improve, and she was convinced that everyone around her had already given up on her. Teachers barely paid attention to her, and her classmates whispered behind her back. Emily felt invisible and lost. Her parents, frustrated and worried, decided to hire a private tutor, someone who could help Emily catch up and finally succeed. That's how Marcus entered her life, a young man from a neighboring neighborhood. With a reputation for being smart and hard-working, Marcus was African American, and his background was very different from Emily's world of privilege. The day Marcus arrived, Emily was waiting in the study room, sitting by the grand piano her mother loved so much. When the door opened, Marcus stepped in quietly, carrying his books and a calm confidence. Emily barely looked at him. She felt an immediate resistance, not just because he was new, but because of the walls she had built around herself. She thought to herself that he didn't belong in her world, that he couldn't understand her problems. Marcus greeted her politely. "Good afternoon, Emily." "I'm Marcus, your new tutor," Emily responded with a cold glance. "Let's just get this over with," she said. "I'm not sure you can help me." Marcus smiled gently. "I'm here to try my best." Their first lesson began awkwardly. Emily was distant, often distracted, and sometimes openly dismissive. She rolled her eyes when Marcus explained concepts, made sarcastic remarks, and seemed determined to test his patience. Despite this, Marcus remained calm. He knew that breaking through Emily's defenses would take time. He didn't take her attitude personally. Instead, he listened carefully, noticed what made her uncomfortable, and adjusted his approach. After the lesson ended, Marcus packed his things slowly. "I understand this is hard," Emily said, without looking at him. "But I'm not the kind of person who gives up." Marcus nodded. "Neither am I." And with that simple exchange, a fragile bridge between them began to form, even if neither realized it yet. The lessons continued, and each session brought new challenges. Emily still struggled with the material, often frustrated by her own limitations. But Marcus did not give up. Slowly, he started to find a way to connect with her, beyond the schoolwork. At first, the conversations remained strictly about algebra, literature, and history. But one afternoon, as rain tapped gently against the window, Marcus noticed Emily staring out with a distant look. "Is everything okay?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, then sighed. "It's just, everything feels so overwhelming sometimes. My parents expect so much from me. If I fail, it's not just me. It's like I'm letting down everyone who's ever believed in me." Marcus nodded, understanding more than she knew. Pressure can be heavy. "When I was a kid, life wasn't easy either. Growing up in the neighborhood next door, I had to work twice as hard just to get noticed, to be taken seriously." Emily turned toward him, curiosity softening her eyes. "Tell me about it," she said. Marcus shared stories of his childhood. The late nights studying by dim light because his family couldn't afford much. The doubts he had about whether he could escape the cycle he was born into. But through it all, he held on to a belief that education could be his way out. Listening to Marcus, Emily felt something inside her shift. Here was someone who understood struggle from a place so different from hers, yet somehow it connected them. She began opening up more, sharing her fears of disappointing her parents, the constant feeling of never being good enough. For the first time, the tutoring sessions became more than just about passing tests. They became a space where two people from different worlds found common ground. Sometimes they laughed over silly mistakes. Other times, they talked late into the evening about dreams and hopes, things Emily never dared to say out loud before. Their relationship deepened, built on respect and a growing sympathy neither could ignore. Emily no longer saw Marcus just as a tutor. He was becoming a trusted ally in a confusing world, and Marcus saw in Emily not just a rich girl with problems, but someone with a hidden strength waiting to be uncovered. Together, they were learning more than just school subjects. They were learning how to trust, how to hope, and how to face the future, no longer as strangers, but as companions on a difficult journey. The calm routine that Emily and Marcus had built was suddenly shattered. One evening, after school, Emily returned home to the sound of raised voices echoing through the hallways. Her parents were arguing, louder than ever before. Words filled with anger, disappointment, and bitterness. The fragile stability of her family was breaking apart. Emily felt powerless. The divorce was inevitable, and the weight of it crushed her spirit. At school, her focus disappeared entirely. Homework was left unfinished, and the desire to even attend classes began to fade. She felt like giving up on everything, including her own future. Marcus noticed the change immediately during their next session. Emily arrived late, her eyes red, her usual spark gone. "What's going on?" Emily asked calmly. She hesitated, struggling to speak. "My parents, they're separating. It feels like my whole world is falling apart. I don't know if I can do this anymore. The school, the expectations, everything." Marcus sat quietly for a moment, then said, "Sometimes life hits us harder than we expect. But giving up won't fix the pain. You have strength inside you even if you don't feel it right now." Emily looked at him, searching for hope in his steady eyes. "I don't know if I can be strong," she whispered. Marcus reached out and gently placed a hand on hers. "You're not alone. I'm here for you, and I believe in you. We'll get through this together." His words didn't magically fix everything, but they were the lifeline Emily desperately needed. Over the following weeks, Marcus became more than a tutor. He was her confidant and her support. Whenever she felt overwhelmed, he was there to listen and remind her of her worth. Slowly, Emily found the courage to keep going. She started studying again, even when it was hard. With Marcus's encouragement, she faced her fears one by one. During these difficult days, the bond between them deepened. What began as a professional relationship quietly shifted into something more personal. There were lingering glances and subtle touches, moments where the air seemed charged with something neither wanted to name aloud. One afternoon, after a particularly hard conversation about her family, Emily stayed behind after their session. Marcus noticed the softness in her eyes and the way she hesitated before speaking. "I don't know what I would do without you," she said softly. Marcus smiled, his heart beating faster. "You don't have to face anything alone anymore." That moment marked the beginning of something new, a tender spark of romance growing between them, born from shared struggles and genuine care. Emily still had a long road ahead, but for the first time, she felt she had someone who truly understood her. And Marcus, too, realized this connection was changing him in ways he hadn't expected. Together, they were learning not just about lessons and life, but about trust, healing, and the quiet power of love. That evening, the house was unusually quiet. The last rays of sunlight had faded, leaving soft shadows to dance across the walls. Emily and Marcus had just finished their tutoring session, but an unexpected delay kept them inside the house longer than usual. The rest of the world outside felt distant and unimportant. Emily was packing her books when she realized the clock had slipped far past the usual time for her to leave. Her parents were out, and the house was empty. For the first time, she noticed Marcus sitting closer than before, the calm confidence in his eyes drawing her in. There was a moment of silence that felt heavy and charged, like the calm before a storm. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, emotions swirling inside her, fear, desire, confusion, and something unfamiliar but thrilling. Marcus looked at her with the same mix of hesitation and hope. Without words, the space between them disappeared. Their hands touched tentatively at first. Then with growing certainty, the tension broke like a wave as they leaned into each other, sharing a gentle but powerful kiss. It was the beginning of something neither had fully anticipated, but both secretly longed for. The warmth of the moment wrapped around them as they gave in to their feelings. It was not just a physical connection, but an emotional release, a silent understanding that they belonged to each other, at least in that fleeting instant. The outside world, with its judgments and challenges, faded away. Later, as they lay side by side, the reality of what had happened slowly settled in. The room was dimly lit, shadows playing softly on their faces, revealing vulnerability and curiosity in equal measure. Neither spoke at first, both lost in thoughts that were difficult to express. The next morning brought with it a storm of emotions. Emily woke up with a flutter of anxiety, her mind racing through the night's memories. What had they done? Was it right, or reckless? Would things ever be the same again? The fear of judgment from herself and others gnawed at her confidence. Marcus felt it too. The awkwardness of stepping into uncharted territory. But beneath the uncertainty was a new clarity, a deeper connection that no longer needed words to be understood. He wanted to be there for Emily, to protect what they had started, even if it meant facing difficult conversations. At school, their eyes met briefly, and in that silent glance was a promise, fragile but sincere. They were no longer just tutor and student, something more profound had begun, threading their lives together in ways they were only starting to comprehend. Despite the embarrassment and fear, they found comfort in the knowledge that their bond was real. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't be easy, but it was theirs. And in a world full of uncertainties, that truth was a beacon of hope neither wanted to lose. In the heart of the city stood a prestigious restaurant known not only for its exquisite cuisine, but also for its unforgiving atmosphere. It was a place where tradition ruled and change was often met with resistance. When Darius, a talented black chef with a passion for bold flavors and innovative dishes, was hired, he knew the road ahead would not be easy. The kitchen, a battlefield of simmering egos and old biases, was not welcoming. His new colleagues eyed him with suspicion and sometimes outright disdain. The head chef's subtle glances and dismissive remarks made it clear that Darius was seen as an outsider, someone who did not belong in their refined world. Among the staff was Caroline, a waitress from a wealthy family who had always looked down on those she considered beneath her social class. When she first saw Darius walk through the kitchen doors, her thoughts were laced with the prejudices she had grown up with. To her he was just another employee, hardly worthy of respect. But as days passed and she witnessed Darius's unwavering dedication and undeniable talent, the walls she had built around her assumptions began to crack. One evening, as the restaurant buzzed with the usual crowd, Caroline found herself in the midst of a personal storm. Her family was unraveling, secrets spilling into the light, and she felt lost in a world she had once controlled effortlessly. It was then that Darius noticed her quiet distress. Without words, he offered a simple gesture, a perfectly crafted dish he had made just for her. It was not just food, it was a message of hope and understanding. As Caroline tasted the meal, something shifted inside her. She saw Darius not as a stereotype or a symbol of her own biases, but as a man with a story, with struggles and dreams just like hers. They began to talk, first hesitantly. Then with growing openness, Darius shared tales of his journey, the hurdles he overcame, the fire that drove him to cook despite the odds. Caroline revealed the pressures of her family's expectations and the loneliness hidden behind her privileged facade. Their friendship blossomed into something deeper, founded on mutual respect and empathy, but the challenges were far from over. The restaurant faced financial troubles, with old rivals threatening to shutter its doors. It was Darius's creativity and resilience that sparked a transformation. He introduced fresh ideas to the menu, blending his heritage with classic techniques, capturing the attention of critics and patrons alike. Slowly the restaurant's fortunes turned around, and Caroline found herself inspired by Darius's strength and vision. Together they navigated the complexities of the kitchen and the personal battles they faced. In the process, Caroline learned to shed her prejudices, while Darius found not only acceptance but a partner who believed in him. The chef's redemption was not just about saving a restaurant, it was a story of breaking barriers, confronting biases, and discovering unexpected friendship in the most unlikely places. It reminded everyone that true talent and character could never be confined by race or class, but could only shine when given the chance. Emily's world was shifting faster than she could keep up. The tension with her parents had reached a breaking point. They were furious, unable to accept the changes in her, the way she was growing closer to Marcus, the private tutor from the neighboring district, the boy they had once dismissed without a second thought. Their disapproval wasn't just about Marcus himself, it was about everything he represented. The barriers Emily was crossing, the social expectations she was refusing to obey. Conversations at home became battles. Her father's voice raised sharply, as he insisted Emily focus only on what mattered in their world: status, reputation, and carefully controlled futures. Her mother, torn between love and loyalty to her husband's views, pleaded for Emily to understand the consequences of stepping outside their carefully drawn lines. But Emily had begun to hear a different voice. Her own. She knew the path ahead would not be easy. Society's whispers and pointed glances were already following her. Friends she once considered close started drifting away, uncomfortable with the changes they saw in her. Yet, for the first time in a long time, Emily felt alive, authentic, and free from the weight of others' expectations. She made a decision: she would no longer let stereotypes dictate her life or her heart. Meanwhile, Marcus was facing his own turning point. His relentless dedication and undeniable talent had caught the attention of a prestigious culinary institute, offering him a scholarship. This opportunity was not just a career milestone, but a chance to elevate his status, to break free from the limitations that had always shadowed him. Yet, even as he prepared for this new chapter, he remained grounded by his connection to Emily, knowing that their journey was intertwined. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with hues of gold and pink, Emily and Marcus met at a quiet park bench away from the noise of judgment and expectation. They spoke openly, their voices steady with determination and hope. Emily said softly, "It's terrifying, but I'm ready to face whatever comes next. I want to live for myself, not for anyone else's image of who I should be." Marcus nodded, his eyes reflecting the same fierce resolve. "Whatever happens, we face it together. We've come too far to turn back now." The barriers still loomed, the disapproval, the social divide, the challenges ahead, but they stood shoulder to shoulder, ready to fight for their truth. Their love had grown beyond the initial spark. It had matured into a bond fortified by struggle and mutual respect. In the weeks that followed, Emily's parents slowly began to see the change in their daughter, not as rebellion, but as growth. Marcus's achievements began to earn him recognition not only in his community, but also in the circles that once looked down on him. The once clear lines of division started to blur. Together, Emily and Marcus navigated the complexities of their worlds, learning that true acceptance comes not from fitting into molds, but from courageously breaking them. Their story became a testament to the power of love to challenge prejudice, to inspire change, and to open new paths where none seemed possible before. This was not just a victory for two young hearts, it was a triumph over the invisible walls that society builds, a reminder that sometimes, the greatest battles are won not with fists, but with the courage to be oneself, and the strength to stand by those we love. After all the storms they had weathered, Emily and Marcus finally stepped into a new chapter of their lives together. It wasn't just about living under the same roof anymore. It was about building a life rooted deeply in trust, respect, and unwavering support. The walls that once confined them had fallen, replaced by a foundation of shared dreams and mutual understanding. Emily, once overwhelmed by self-doubt and the crushing expectations of others, had transformed into a confident woman who believed in her own worth. The pressure that once threatened to break her now fueled her ambition. With Marcus by her side, she pursued her goals with renewed passion. She excelled in her studies, but more importantly, she embraced her individuality, refusing to let anyone else define her future. Marcus, having risen from a background marked by struggle and skepticism, was no longer just the tutor or the outsider. He had become a partner, an equal, a beacon of strength and kindness in Emily's life. His own journey toward success was inspiring, from earning prestigious awards in the culinary world to opening opportunities that once seemed unreachable. Yet, despite all the acclaim, he remained humble, grounded by the love he shared with Emily and the battles they had fought together. Their days were filled with laughter and quiet moments alike. They celebrated small victories, like mastering a difficult recipe or acing an exam, as if they were grand achievements, because each step forward was a testament to their resilience. Their love was a refuge, a safe place where both could shed the masks they once wore to fit in, and simply be themselves. One evening, as they sat side by side watching the sunset from their cozy apartment balcony, Marcus looked at Emily and said, "I never imagined I'd find someone who truly sees me, not just the surface, but all of me. You changed everything." Emily smiled, feeling the warmth of his words seep into her heart. "And you showed me how to stand tall, no matter what anyone else says. Together we're unstoppable." Their story was more than a romance. It was a message to anyone who had ever felt trapped by prejudice or expectation. Love, they proved, had the power to break down walls, to heal wounds, and to rewrite the future. As the days turned into months, and months into years, Emily and Marcus built a life full of promise and hope. Their journey wasn't always easy, but it was theirs, authentic, unyielding, and beautiful. In their love, they found freedom, strength, and the courage to be unapologetically themselves. This was the ending they had dreamed of, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. A testament that when two souls meet with open hearts, even the tallest barriers can crumble, and a brighter, more inclusive world can begin to take shape.
Claire checked her watch for the third time in a minute. Her flight to New York was scheduled to depart in just over an hour, and the morning traffic in Atlanta was crawling at a glacial pace. Her heart pounded as the taxi inched forward. Today wasn't just another business trip, it was the trip, a face-to-face final interview for the creative director position at Westridge & Co., EATAT, a company she'd dreamed of working for since college. The kind of role people move cities for. The kind of chance you don't get twice. She tapped her fingers nervously on the seat, half listening to the driver's radio and half praying the security line wouldn't be long. The second the taxi pulled up in front of Terminal B, she tossed a hurried thanks, grabbed her carry-on and sprinted through the glass doors. That's when she saw him. An elderly black man lay sprawled on the sidewalk just outside the entrance. A cracked cane lay a few feet away. His groceries, 2 bags from a discount market, had burst open, apples rolling near the curb. Dozens of people streamed past. Some glanced. Most didn't even notice. Claire stopped. Just for a second. She could still make it. Gate C12 wasn't far. The man wasn't bleeding. Maybe someone else would help. A security guard, an airport staff member. But no one stopped. He groaned as he tried to sit up, wincing, gripping his side. Claire bit her lip, then turned around and walked back. "Are you okay?" she asked, kneeling beside him. The man looked up, surprised. His eyes were cloudy with age but alert. "Just slipped," he muttered. "My hip. I think I landed on it wrong." She offered her arm. "Let's get you sitting up, okay?" It took effort. He was heavier than he looked, and the pain made him grit his teeth. Claire flagged down a distracted worker from inside, who shrugged and said they couldn't assist without paperwork. "Of course not," she muttered under her breath. She helped him sit against the wall and looked him over. His coat was threadbare, but he was clean. His voice had a rasp, but there was a quiet dignity in it. "I need to call someone," she said. "An ambulance?" No ambulance. Can't afford that." He waved her off. "But there's a clinic just 10 minutes from here, on Waverly. You think you could—" He didn't finish. Claire had already made the decision. She called another cab and helped him into it. The driver rolled his eyes but said nothing. All the while, Claire kept checking the time. She knew the gate would close soon. She also knew she wouldn't make it. Not anymore. At the clinic, the nurse asked for his name. He just said George. No ID, no insurance. Claire quietly paid the intake fee, then waited until a doctor came to check on him. He's going to be fine, the nurse told her later. Bruised rib. He'll need some rest, maybe some help for a few days. Claire sighed with relief and finally stepped outside to make the call she'd been dreading. She dialed the number the company had given her. The assistant answered, polite but rushed. Hi. This is Claire Weston. I won't make my flight. Something came up. I know this is last minute, but I was wondering. I'm sorry, Miss Weston. The assistant cut her off. The panel's only meeting today. If you're not in New York by noon, the opportunity passes. We wish you the best in your future pursuits. Click. Claire stood there, stunned, then sat on the bench outside the clinic. Her phone slid into her lap. She'd thrown away her one shot. For a stranger, she wasn't even sure why she did it. The door behind her opened, and George stepped out, holding a small prescription bag, and moving gingerly. He sat beside her, breathing heavily. You didn't have to do all that, miss, he said. I know, Claire replied. I just couldn't leave you there. George gave a slow nod. Most people would've. I see it all the time. He reached into his coat and pulled out something, a small carved wooden keychain, looked handmade. He pressed it into her palm. For you, I can't accept this, she protested. You already did more than most would. It's just wood. But I carved it when my son was born. Reminds me that good still exists. She looked at him, surprised. Thank you. He just smiled. She never even asked his last name, and by the time she looked up again, the man was gone, swallowed into the city, like a ghost that never needed help in the first place. The taxi ride back to her apartment felt longer than usual. Kate sat in the back seat, staring blankly out the window. The Atlanta skyline blurred past, but her mind was somewhere else, somewhere between regret and confusion. Her career, her goals, everything she'd worked so hard for, gone. All because of a decision she wasn't sure even made sense. She unlocked the door to her small apartment, dropped her bag, and sank onto the couch without taking off her shoes. The silence in the room was deafening. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Jasmine. Did you make the flight? Kate stared at it for a moment, before replying. No, I missed it. Helped an old man who fell outside the airport. A few seconds later, Jasmine called. You did what? Kate sighed. I saw this man, old hurt. Everyone just walked past him. I couldn't do that. You missed the interview. Yeah, they said there's no second chance. Jasmine paused, then said softly. You did the right thing, Claire. That kind of humanity. It's rare. Don't let a job make you question that. Kate sighed. Claire didn't answer. Her chest felt heavy. She wanted to believe Jasmine, but reality didn't pay rent. Across town, in a quiet craftsman-style house, tucked behind a modest gate, George Baker sat in a worn recliner, wrapped in a heating pad. His ribs ached, but not as badly as his pride. Still, something about that young woman stayed in his mind. Her voice, her patience, the way she didn't even ask who he was, or why he was alone. He reached for the landline beside him, and dialed. A deep voice answered on the second ring. Hey Pops. You okay? Yeah, boy. I'm all right. Took a spill at the airport today. Some lady helped me out. Wait. What? You went to the airport? Just to get some things near there? Slipped on the sidewalk. Jesus, Dad. Did anyone help you? That's what I'm saying. Most folks just kept walking. But this white woman, young, dressed for business, she stopped. Missed her flight, to get me to a clinic. That's rare, George. His son said after a pause. I know, she didn't even ask for anything. Just said she couldn't leave me there. Paid for the doctor. Waited around. Gave me the time of day, like I mattered. What was her name? Claire. Didn't catch her last name. On the other end of the line, Mason Baker leaned back in his office chair, and looked out at the private tarmac below. Jets were parked like toys under the late afternoon sun. He managed one of the fastest growing airline companies in the US, Verta Air. Built it from scratch, after years of learning under people who always looked down on him. They wore suits, and shook hands with smiles they didn't mean. Called him the smart one, but never the right kind. Always something behind their eyes. He had worked hard, harder than most. And now he sat on the board, owned the planes, signed the checks, but he never forgot the janitors, the baggage handlers, the mechanics, like his dad had been, a war vet who'd fixed fighter jets, and later commercial aircraft, until his hands got too stiff from age and arthritis. Mason frowned. Most of the people in first class wouldn't even see his father on the ground, would have walked right past him. But this woman, Claire, she stopped, gave something without needing anything back. He tapped a few keys on his desk computer and opened the internal system. Claire. What did Dad say? Claire. Something. Young. White. Business clothes. Missed a flight from Atlanta to New York. Around 9 a.m. He pulled up the manifest. 3 women named Claire had tickets on that flight. 2 boarded. 1 didn't. Claire Weston. He clicked her profile. A regular customer. Flown economy 6 times in the past year. Paid with her own card. No corporate billing. Traveled light. He sat back, intrigued. There was something different here. Maybe it was time for someone like her to sit in first class. Or maybe something more. 3 days passed. Claire had gone from refreshing her inbox every hour to not checking it at all. Her resume had been perfect, her cover letter passionate, but that dream opportunity was gone. She tried not to think about what could have been. The bills, however, didn't care about principals or missed planes. It was late afternoon when her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. Hi, is this Claire Weston? Yes. Speaking. Hi. My name's Alicia from Northline Creative. We came across your profile on a freelance network. There's a small branding project that might fit your skill set. It's short-term but paid. Interested? Claire blinked, caught off guard. Sure. I mean yes. I'm interested. Great. The client would like to meet in person, just to discuss some early ideas. Are you available tomorrow at 11 a.m.? Cafe Mercurio, downtown. Absolutely, thank you. She hung up, confused but relieved. It wasn't the job she'd missed, but it was something. And right now, something was enough. The next day, she arrived 10 minutes early. Cafe Mercurio was a cozy little spot tucked between 2 high-rises, the kind of place people walked past 100 times and never noticed. The interior was quiet, filled with warm light, brick walls and the smell of fresh espresso. Claire chose a table by the window and tried not to fidget. She'd brought her portfolio, though she wasn't sure how formal this would be. A man entered the cafe precisely at 11. He was tall, clean-cut, with a calm presence, dressed in a button-down and jeans. Casual. But there was something polished about him. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. Claire Weston? He asked with a polite smile. That's me. Nice to meet you. I'm Mason. Just a manager with the startup that needs your help. She stood to shake his hand, and something about him seemed familiar. His voice maybe. But she didn't place it. They sat. A Mason ordered a black coffee. Claire declined anything. So, tell me about your work, he asked. Genuinely interested. Claire explained her background in marketing and brand storytelling. She mentioned some past projects, a mix of corporate and nonprofit, but there was a weariness in her voice, like someone who had been trying too hard for too long. I'm in a bit of a reset, to be honest, she admitted. Life threw a curveball recently. What happened? Mason asked, tilting his head. She paused. I missed a flight for an important meeting, helped someone outside the airport. Old man. He fell. No one else stopped. I did. She looked down at her hands. Sometimes I wonder if that was foolish. That opportunity was huge. Mason smiled softly, but didn't reveal anything. Sounds like integrity to me. Rare stuff these days. Claire shrugged. Integrity doesn't pay rent. Maybe not today. But it leaves a mark. They spoke for almost an hour. Mason asked thoughtful questions. Claire gave honest answers. There was no performance. No networking smile. Just 2 people talking like adults. At one point Claire laughed. The first real laugh she'd had in days. So this startup, she said near the end. What's it about? Early stage aviation tech, some brand repositioning, some investor decks. Pretty dry stuff. But I think you'd be good at it. Claire narrowed her eyes. You sure? I mean, I've never done aviation. We're not looking for industry people. We're looking for perspective. Real voice. You have that. She nodded slowly. This wasn't what she expected, but there was something grounding in how he said it. He wasn't overselling anything. Okay. I'm in. Let's do it. Great. Mason said, finishing his coffee. I'll send the brief tonight. And Claire, thanks for taking this meeting. She smiled. Thanks for calling me. As he walked out of the cafe, Mason didn't look back. But he was smiling. He'd met the woman who stopped for his father. And she didn't even know it. The weeks passed quietly. But not without change. What began as a small freelance project evolved into something deeper. Claire and Mason met often. At first to discuss slides, branding language, font choices. But slowly meetings stretched longer, drifting from business into laughter, shared meals and walks that had nothing to do with work. He never pushed, never flirted in ways that felt transactional. Instead, he listened, asked how she was sleeping, asked what her mother used to cook, asked what scared her when she was little. Claire started looking forward to those talks more than she wanted to admit. One Tuesday morning, after finalizing a presentation deck, Mason suggested they visit a local shelter. It's something my father's involved in, he said casually. I try to help when I can. Want to come? Claire hesitated. She had no issue with the idea. In fact, it warmed her, but it felt oddly personal. Still, something in his tone made her say yes. They drove in silence most of the way, soft music playing on the radio. The shelter wasn't what she expected. It was clean, modest, full of movement. Men gathered around folding tables, chatting, some playing cards, others cleaning. As soon as they walked in, several men straightened up. Mr. George's boy, one of them called out with a wide grin, and look at you, bringing a lady today. Mason chuckled and waved. Claire was surprised to see how many men greeted him, some with handshakes, others with warm nods. Then an older man stepped out of a small office at the back. Her breath caught slightly. It was the man she'd helped at the airport. He was standing now, cane in one hand, posture straighter than before. He had the quiet pride of someone who'd lived hard and come through the other side. Claire whispered to Mason, "That's him." "Who?" "The man I told you about. At the airport." Mason smiled, but didn't answer right away. Instead, he motioned her toward the older man. Claire approached. "Hey, I don't know if you remember me." The man turned, recognition blooming in his eyes. "Of course I do," he said, his voice steady and kind. "You were the only one who stopped." "I haven't forgotten." Claire's throat tightened. "I never even asked your name." "George," he said, reaching out his hand. "George Baker." She took it. "It's good to see you up and moving, George." "That's thanks to you, young lady. I've had my share of knocks. But that day that was different. Most people don't see us. You did." He nodded toward Mason. "You're in good company. This one sees people too." Claire glanced at Mason, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. George excused himself to greet someone else, and she turned to Mason. "You didn't tell me." "Didn't think it was mine to tell." They spent the afternoon helping serve meals. Claire found herself talking to the residents, not just about their needs, but about their stories. One man used to teach jazz theory, another built furniture by hand, another simply said he hadn't heard his daughter's voice in 8 years. When they left the shelter, Claire was quieter than usual. "You okay?" Mason asked as they drove. I thought I knew what homelessness looked like." "I didn't. They're not invisible, Mason. They're just unfocused by the world. Blurred." He nodded. "My dad says dignity is a mirror. You just have to stand close enough for them to see it again." Claire looked at him. Really looked. "You and your dad. You're something else." He smiled. "So, are you?" That night, he walked her up to her apartment door. The street lamp cast a soft glow on the sidewalk. Neither of them moved to say goodbye right away. "I had a good day," Claire said softly. Me too. They stood there for a second too long. Then she leaned forward. Just a little. He met her halfway. The kiss was gentle. Warm. Not rushed. It didn't feel like something new. It felt like something that had been waiting patiently for the right moment. When they finally pulled apart, Claire whispered, "Good night, Mason." "Good night, Claire." And for the first time in weeks she went to bed smiling. Not because something had gone right, but because something had gone honest. Claire had just finished watering the dying plants on her tiny balcony when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then picked up. "Miss Harper? This is Sandra Holt, from Skyline Talent Management. I believe you applied with us some time ago?" Claire froze. That had been weeks ago, one of the many freelance agencies that had tossed her aside without a second thought. "Yes, I did," she answered cautiously. "Well, things have changed a bit. There's been some media inquiry, a piece about discriminatory hiring patterns. Your name came up in connection with an incident involving a missed flight and an act of kindness. A journalist traced your portfolio. We might have acted unfairly. Would you be willing to speak with us again?" Claire blinked. She wasn't expecting an apology, let alone interest. "I'm willing," she said carefully, "but I won't lie to make you look better." "We wouldn't ask that," Sandra replied, a touch too quickly. "The journalist might reach out as well. Her name's Kira Dunn. She's with an independent outlet." 2 days later, Claire sat across from Kira in a tiny cafe, her hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. The journalist listened intently, barely interrupting. "So let me get this straight," Kira asked. "Finally. You helped a man in need, missed your opportunity, got dismissed without even a review, and never complained." Claire shrugged. "I was upset, sure, but it wasn't news. It's just life. You try to do right, and hope it matters." Kira leaned forward. "Well, it mattered to someone, because the man you helped. We think he's George Baker." Claire's eyes widened. She nodded slowly. "It is." Kira smiled. "Then this story is bigger than hiring practices." When the article went live 3 days later, it spread faster than anyone expected. Titled "One Flight Missed, One Life Changed," it painted Claire as a symbol of integrity. The woman who stopped for a stranger. The woman who lost something, and never asked for it back. Mason saw it, of course. He was in his office when the notification popped up, his father's face. Claire's name. The story of what happened that day. The story he already knew, but reading it through her words shook something in him. She had no idea who he was, yet she had still acted with grace, courage, and honesty. And now she was being publicly praised, while he was still hiding behind a lie. Mason shut the laptop, and leaned back in his chair, covering his eyes with his hand. He had to tell her. He couldn't keep pretending. But before he could plan how, fate stepped in. Later that week, Claire arrived at Mason's building for a project meeting. He greeted her at the front, smiled, offered coffee. Everything felt normal, until they reached his office. She had never been inside before. It was sleek, minimal, a wall of glass behind his desk, overlooking the skyline. But what caught her eye wasn't the view. It was the photograph. Sitting on a shelf near the window, half hidden by a bookend, was a framed photo of Mason and George, both smiling, both unmistakably close. Claire stepped toward it slowly. "Is that your father?" Mason turned, saw the frame, and froze. "Yes," he admitted softly. Claire didn't speak at first. Her eyes moved from the photo to him, piecing together everything she hadn't seen before. "You told me you worked for a startup." "Technically I do. It's one of mine." "You're the owner," Claire whispered. "Of the airline. Of the company. Of all of this." Mason stepped forward. "Claire, I didn't mean to. All this time, you lied to me." "I didn't lie," he said quickly. "I just didn't tell you everything. I wanted to know you without the title between us. I wanted to see the real you. And what? You thought I'd treat you differently if I knew. Most people do. Claire, you didn't. You were already honest. You were already good. I didn't want to break that." Claire shook her head, backing away slightly. "But you did break it. You watched me struggle. Let me think I was just some temp worker. Let me talk about job rejections, like it was a joke. You could have said something. I didn't want pity. I didn't want power to be part of this. But it was, from the start. She stood there, her breath catching in her throat, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. The job, the meetings, the moments, the kiss, every one of them now painted with a different color. Claire stared at him. Who are you? Really? Mason didn't answer right away. Someone who didn't know how to tell the truth. Not because I don't care, but because I care too much. She turned away, gripping the strap of her bag. I need time. Claire walked out, leaving him alone in the office, the photo of him and his father still smiling in the background. A frozen reminder of everything he'd built, and everything he might have just broken. Claire spent 2 days walking in circles around her tiny apartment. She didn't sleep much. Every corner of her mind was clouded with contradiction. Mason had lied. Yes, but he had also seen her when no one else did. He had offered her work, respect, even tenderness. And above all, she couldn't forget the way he looked at her. Not like a man with power, but like a man who had finally found something real. Still, trust once cracked was hard to hold. On the third morning, Claire took the train across town and stood once again at the front steps of the community shelter. The same place Mason had taken her to weeks before. She wasn't sure what she was looking for until George Baker opened the door. He smiled, as if he'd been expecting her. I figured you'd come eventually, he said. They sat at the back in the staff room. Over lukewarm coffee, Claire told him everything. Or rather, she didn't have to. George already knew. He's stubborn, George said, shaking his head. Gets that from me. Always trying to prove himself, even when he doesn't have to. Claire looked down at her cup. He said he wanted to see who I was. That he didn't want the title between us. George nodded. That's true. But he should have known that the real ones don't care about titles. Claire met his eyes. Do you think he meant well? George chuckled. I always told Mason, don't go chasing the prettiest girl in the room. Marry the one who reaches down to grab your hand when you're lying flat on the asphalt. Claire blinked. Her chest tightened. That sounds like something you've lived. It is, George said simply. And for what it's worth, you grabbed my hand that day. He saw that. He needed to see that. Later that evening, Claire received a text from an unknown number. It only said pack and light. Meet me at Hangar 7. No questions. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled. Despite herself. That night, she stood at the edge of a private airstrip. Cool wind brushing past her hair. A sleek white jet sat waiting under the stars. Mason stepped down the stairway in a simple black jacket, no tie, no crowd, just him. He held out a hand. No titles. No suits, just me. Claire laughed softly and took it. Inside, the cabin was warm and quiet. No staff, no champagne. Just 2 seats at the front, side by side, facing the controls. Claire raised an eyebrow. You're flying. I used to. Not anymore. But tonight I wanted to remind you where this all started. She sat beside him, her fingers brushing the controls. This is a little dramatic, even for you. Mason smiled. Maybe, but I needed you to know. You're not just a passenger anymore. You're my co-pilot. Claire's breath caught in her throat. The moment hung between them. Quiet and trembling. You lied, she whispered. I did. You scared me. I know. And now you're offering me the sky. He nodded slowly. Only if you want it. She looked at him. Really looked. The man who'd made mistakes, but never mocked her. The man who'd believed in her before the world remembered her name. Claire laughed. A real laugh. The kind she hadn't felt in months. Tears stung her eyes. I hate how much I don't hate you. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. Above them, the stars blurred through the curved windows. The hum of the engine faded into silence as the plane slowly lifted from the ground, carrying them into a new altitude, a new beginning. Months later, the headlines would read, Claire Harper joins Mason Airlines as strategic advisor and outreach director. Below that, a smaller caption, engaged to CEO Mason Baker, but those were just words. The real story was a woman who stopped for a man on the pavement, and a man who learned to stop hiding behind altitude and legacy. Together they flew not toward status, but toward each other. And this time, Claire wasn't alone in the sky.
Everyone saw it. The headline was everywhere. CEO fired after racist remarks go viral. Underneath, a photo of her, Eleanor Mason, founder of a wellness tech company that had once been praised for its diversity and ethics. Now she was labeled a hypocrite, a liar, a monster. No one asked her side of the story. One moment, she had been standing in her office, speaking with an HR intern. The next, a 17-second video, cropped and captioned, exploded across social media. It showed her saying the words, "You people are always late." What the video didn't show was the part before, when she'd been talking about delivery services. What it also didn't show was the intern smirking as she hit record after deliberately baiting Eleanor. Within hours, the board called an emergency meeting. She was asked to resign, then told to leave. By the next morning, angry crowds had gathered outside her house. She watched through the blinds as someone threw red paint on her garage door. "Murder of dreams," it read. Her inbox was flooded. Some messages were cold. "You deserve to lose everything." Others were violent. "Hope someone teaches you a lesson." She called her lawyer, but he had already dropped her. Days blurred. Investors pulled out. A class action lawsuit emerged. Her reputation shredded. Her name now a warning. Even her closest friends stopped replying to her texts. The woman who had mentored dozens of young women in business, who had funded scholarships and personally led outreach programs in underprivileged neighborhoods, suddenly erased. The final blow came 3 weeks later, when her house was repossessed. She had drained her savings trying to stay afloat. Now, she stood on the sidewalk with 2 bags and no destination. She ended up at a women's shelter under a fake name. She scrubbed dishes in exchange for a bed. No one recognized her. No one believed her when she tried to explain who she used to be. So she stopped trying. For months, she remained invisible. Just another shadow among the discarded. Until one evening, when a black SUV pulled up outside the shelter, a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, walking with a distinct limp. He wore a tailored suit, and behind him stood 2 assistants. He walked slowly toward the door, then asked the receptionist, "I'm looking for a woman named Eleanor Mason." The receptionist frowned. "We don't give out information like that, sir." The man smiled. "Tell her it's someone she once saved. At the mall. 10 years ago. She gave me her lunch and paid for a motel, when I had nothing." The receptionist turned pale, then slowly nodded. In the back of the building, Eleanor was cleaning floors when she heard her name. A man with 1 leg had come to find her, and her life was about to change. Again. 10 years earlier, Eleanor Mason had been a different woman. Not in appearance, her sharp suits and tired eyes were already there, but in spirit, she was still full of purpose back then. Though the cracks were beginning to show, leading a growing startup in the health tech world, attending endless meetings, dodging burnout with too much coffee and too little sleep, it was all catching up with her. That afternoon, she had carved out 30 minutes for herself. A quick walk through the mall, just to breathe, think, maybe buy a new pair of flats. She didn't expect to witness anything unusual. She didn't expect to be pulled into someone else's nightmare. But then she heard shouting. Near the central food court, a commotion had gathered. A man was on the floor, not drunk, not yelling, just sitting, calm, silent, a black man in his mid-30s, wearing a worn hoodie and a baseball cap. His pant leg on one side was pinned up, revealing that he had only 1 leg. A pair of crutches lay beside him. 2 mall security guards towered over him, voices raised. "You can't sit here. Customers are complaining. This is private property." The man tried to explain, his voice calm. "I'm just resting. My stump's aching. I'm not asking for anything." Eleanor froze mid-step. She could feel eyes turning away from the scene, people pretending not to notice. A mother dragged her child past, A group of teens giggled and took a video. The guards didn't care. One reached down, grabbing the man's sleeve. "Get up or we'll make you get up." That was it. Eleanor stepped forward before she even realized what she was doing. "Excuse me," she said, walking straight into the space between them. "Is this how you treat veterans?" The guards blinked. One muttered, "Lady, please don't get involved." But Eleanor didn't back down. "He's not doing anything wrong. He's not panhandling. He's sitting. You're harassing a disabled man." The man on the ground looked up at her, stunned. "I'll call management," she said firmly, "and I'll film this interaction if I have to." "Is that what you want?" The guards hesitated. Then one of them scoffed and turned away. The other gave the man a glare and followed. Once they were gone, Eleanor crouched beside him. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, happens all the time. People don't like the way I look." She sat on the bench next to him. "You hungry?" He didn't answer right away, just gave her a side glance, then nodded. Yeah, I am." "Come on," she said. "Let's get something decent." They ended up at a small diner near the mall. He ordered pancakes and eggs, and ate like he hadn't seen real food in days. Eleanor let him finish before asking anything. "What's your name?" "What's your name?" "Micah," he said quietly. "Micah Rollins. You a vet?" "Yeah, lost my leg in Kandahar. Didn't get much help after. Tried to get back on my feet, no pun intended. Fell through the cracks." She nodded slowly. The kind of nod only someone who's seen too much red tape could give. "Listen," she said, placing a hotel key card on the table. "I booked you 3 nights at a place nearby. They won't ask questions. There's some cash in the envelope too." He looked at it, stunned. "Why are you doing this?" She smiled, just a little, "Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it. And because this world is already cold enough." Micah's eyes filled with something unspoken. "How can I pay you back?" Eleanor stood up, grabbing her coat. "Don't, just take care of yourself. And if one day you become somebody, help someone else." Then she left, without waiting for a thank you. She never saw him again, until 10 years later, when he would walk back into her life, and give it all back. For years after that day at the mall, Eleanor Mason never thought about Micah Rollins again. Not because she didn't care, but because life moved too fast. Her company, Vital Nest, exploded in popularity. What began as a small wellness tech firm turned into a national name. Investors poured in. Magazines featured her as a pioneer. She spoke at conferences, appeared on morning shows, and even sat on diversity panels. People called her a visionary. She worked endlessly, slept little, lived off ambition and anxiety, but it paid off. She built something that mattered. Or so she thought. The fall began with a single post. A junior employee named Tasha, someone Eleanor barely remembered hiring, uploaded a shaky video to her personal feed. The caption read, "My CEO just told me black women like me don't belong in leadership. Here's the proof." The video showed Eleanor in a staff meeting, speaking to a group of interns. The words she said, "You people always seem to struggle with deadlines." It spread like wildfire. No one cared that she was referring to third-party contractors who had botched a product launch. No one cared that the video was cut mid-sentence, and the context was gone. The comments section became a war zone. "She's done. Typical Karen behavior. Burn the company to the ground. Boycott Vital Nest." Within 24 hours, major influencers picked it up. Celebrities tweeted. News anchors speculated. A well-known activist called for her resignation. Protesters gathered outside her office. Eleanor tried to explain. She released a statement. She cried in a live video, but the internet had made up its mind. The board called her in. "It's about optics, Eleanor. Even if you didn't mean it that way, people heard it that way." She was forced out of her own company. Vital Nest issued a press release about their new direction and commitment to anti-racism. The same people she had mentored now deleted her from the narrative entirely. Her inbox, once full of admiration, became venom. "Hope you rot. We're watching you. Racist witch." Even her so-called friends stopped answering. Calls went to voicemail. Emails bounced. The silence screamed louder than the hate. Sponsors pulled out of her speaking gigs. The IRS audited her out of nowhere. Banks froze her assets after a cyber attack triggered red flags. Lawyers dropped her to protect their firm's reputation. She tried to sue for defamation. No one would take the case. Her house, once her sanctuary, was vandalized twice. The second time, someone spray-painted a slur across her front door. Police told her to stay elsewhere for safety. She packed 2 suitcases and left. No one asked where she went. She spent the next months drifting, first at a roadside motel, then a friend's guest room, then nowhere. Her savings disappeared, paying off debts that weren't even hers. Someone had hacked her accounts and redirected funds, and no one seemed to care. Eventually, Eleanor ended up at a women's shelter under the name Lisa. She scrubbed dishes, cleaned toilets, and stayed invisible. The woman who once stood in front of TED audiences now folded, donated laundry, and wept at night behind a cracked bathroom mirror. She never spoke of the incident again. She never thought about the mall, or the man with one leg. That chapter was closed, sealed, buried, until one day, the receptionist called out her name, her real name. "Someone is here to see you," she said. "A man. He said you saved his life." And just like that, the past caught up. But this time, it wasn't to destroy her. It was to bring her back to life. The shelter smelled like bleach and burnt toast. That morning, Eleanor sat on the edge of her cot, lacing up a pair of secondhand sneakers with torn soles. Her fingers were stiff from cold. The radiator had gone out again overnight, and the staff kept saying they'd fix it next week. She had no plans for the day. Maybe she'd volunteer in the kitchen. Maybe not. It didn't really matter anymore. Each morning bled into the next, a quiet shuffle toward nothing. Then came the voice. "Excuse me, Eleanor Mason?" She looked up slowly. No one called her that anymore. Not since everything fell apart. A man stood in the doorway, knees shaven, wearing a tailored coat and polished shoes. He leaned slightly on a sleek black cane, a military-style watch visible under his cuff. Behind him stood 2 suited men, security by the look of them. She blinked, confused. Her first thought was that someone had found her. Another journalist, maybe, or a cruel prank. But then she saw his eyes, kind, steady, familiar. It took a moment, but the memory snapped into place. "Micah?" He smiled. "Took you long enough, Miss Mason." She stood, heart pounding. He was different now. Broader, stronger, sure of himself. But the voice, the quiet warmth in his tone, was unmistakable. What are you doing here?" "I came to find you. I've been looking for months." "Why?" "Because 10 years ago, you saved my life." Eleanor stared at him in disbelief. Micah walked closer, a slight limp in his gait. The 2 men behind him stepped aside as if understanding this was personal. "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" he asked. "In the cab, after you bought me lunch." She nodded slowly, voice barely above a whisper. "I told you to take care of yourself. And if you ever became someone, to pass it on." He grinned. "Well, I did. I became someone." Micah told her everything. After she paid for his hotel stay, he used the last of the cash she'd slipped him to buy a phone and call an old army buddy. The buddy got him into a free veterans program that led to rehab, then therapy, then school. He studied nonprofit administration, Applied for grants, started working with displaced vets. Within 5 years, Micah had launched Forward Base, an organization that built and funded veteran shelters across the country. He partnered with hospitals, churches, even Fortune 500 companies. He'd spoken before Congress, consulted on housing policy. Recently, he'd been appointed senior advisor to Senator Caraway on issues related to homelessness and military re-entry. He was, as one magazine put it, the man who gave the forgotten a future, and he never forgot her. Every project I built, every bed we opened for a vet, I always thought about you, he said. The woman who stood up when no one else did. I've been waiting for a chance to repay that. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't need anything, she said softly. I'm just glad you're doing well. Micah shook his head. That's not enough. He reached into his coat and pulled out a file. He handed it to her. Inside was a formal offer, full-time position. Executive director. At his foundation's newest shelter. A sprawling facility in Virginia focused on women veterans and trauma recovery. With it came a salary, housing, benefits, and a private therapist. You're not just someone who helped me, Eleanor, he said. You're someone this world still needs. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Micah smiled. You told me to help someone else when I made it. So I am. You're my someone else. The room felt warmer somehow. For the first time in years, Eleanor breathed fully, not in fear, not in shame, but in hope. The new apartment was modest but clean. 2 bedrooms, a small balcony overlooking a park, and most importantly, a door she could lock from the inside. Eleanor hadn't had that kind of safety in years. Micah insisted she take it. Rent was covered for the year. No negotiation. But it wasn't just about shelter. He gave her purpose again. At the Foundation's Virginia branch, she worked closely with women who had suffered trauma, displacement, and injustice. Women who, like her, had been silenced by systems they once trusted. Eleanor's empathy wasn't theoretical. It came from the trenches of humiliation and survival. That made her different. That made her needed. Still, something haunted her. A truth that refused to be buried. The incident that destroyed her, the viral moment, hadn't just happened. It had always felt manufactured. Back then, a junior employee named Tasha had posted a shaky video online, accusing Eleanor of making a racially insensitive comment during a team meeting. The video showed no actual evidence, just Tasha's tearful testimony. But it spread like wildfire. Eleanor had been advised not to fight it. PR firms told her denial would look like deflection. Apologies, even if undeserved, were her only shot at recovery. She refused. And for that she was crucified. Now sitting across from Micah at a cafe one afternoon, she told him everything. He listened carefully, then leaned back and said, "Let me look into it." 2 days later, his tech team ran digital forensics on the original post. Within hours, they found anomalies. Metadata had been altered. IP logs traced back to a private network. One linked not to Tasha, but to a corporate rival. Eleanor had outbid 2 months before the scandal broke. Micah didn't stop there. He connected with an independent journalist, a Pulitzer-nominated investigator named Roberta Lang, who owed Micah a favor. She dug deep. Over the next 2 weeks, she uncovered emails, payment trails, and non-disclosure agreements. The truth was sickening. Eleanor's fall wasn't the result of outrage. It was the result of strategy. Executives at Garrison and Bloom, a competing firm, had quietly hired Tasha months earlier. Her role had been to infiltrate, destabilize, and destroy. They used her background as a social shield. If Eleanor pushed back, it could be spun as racism. If she didn't, she'd fall silently. And she did. Until now. Micah's foundation published the findings in a detailed, transparent report. No drama, No spin. Just facts. The media that once shredded Eleanor now hesitated, recalculated, and finally, apologized. Some publicly. Others quietly removed old headlines. The woman they'd branded a monster was in fact the victim of a corporate takedown. Micah didn't gloat. He didn't throw it in anyone's face. He simply sent Eleanor a message the day the story broke. Justice moves slow, but it moves. That evening, she stood in the new shelter's garden, watching volunteers set up a small dinner for residents. One of the women handed her a flower, a white lily, and said softly, "You saved my life this week." Eleanor smiled. "No," she said, "I'm just passing it on." It started with a blurry video, uploaded by an anonymous user on a Monday evening. The footage was old, over 10 years, based on the date stamp, and shaky. Shot on a phone that belonged to a teenager at the time, it captured a chaotic moment inside a mall food court, security guards surrounding a thin, one-legged black man in a torn army jacket, one of them pushing him, another grabbing his arm. Then, a woman in heels and a navy blazer stepped in. She was furious. Unafraid, she raised her voice, demanding they stop. She pointed at the mall's code of conduct on the wall. She got in the way, physically standing between the guards and the man. She helped him up. And when the guards tried to justify themselves, she didn't just argue, she shamed them. Loud enough for everyone to hear, that woman was Eleanor West. Someone had captured it all. The post didn't mention her name at first, but it didn't take long for the internet to recognize her face. The woman once called a racist by the media had risked her own safety to protect a disabled veteran a decade ago. The comments exploded. Wait, is that the same Eleanor West? So all that stuff from before was a lie. She saved him, literally saved him. Within hours, hashtags trended. Eleanor was right. Hall story. Journalists who had once torn her apart reached out for interviews. Talk shows wanted exclusives. Brands who'd once pulled away offered apologies wrapped in PR. Eleanor didn't answer any of them. Instead, she sat quietly in the staff room of one of Micah's shelters, sipping tea, surrounded by the very people she had spent the last year helping. Micah entered the room holding a tablet. "You've seen it?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "It's strange," she said. "That moment, I never even thought it mattered. I just did what anyone should have done." Micah smiled. "It mattered to me." He set the tablet down. There were thousands of comments pouring in, some crying, some apologizing, some sharing how that video changed how they saw everything. And yet, Eleanor didn't look triumphant. She looked calm. "Are you going back?" he asked. "Business, the board, your old life." She shook her head. "That woman in the video, I like her more than the one who built that company. I think I'll stay." Micah didn't press further. He understood. Over the following weeks, Eleanor became a public face, not of scandal, but of resilience. She gave only one interview. It wasn't with a major network. It was a podcast hosted by a young black student who'd been homeless just 2 years earlier. She spoke about silence, power, and kindness that doesn't require cameras. She never once mentioned her accusers. When people asked her why she didn't sue, didn't retaliate, didn't demand retribution, she answered simply, "Because revenge doesn't build shelters." Instead, she and Micah co-founded a new program. It offered transitional housing for women falsely accused or publicly shamed. It was called the Lily House, named after the flower she'd once been given by a resident in the garden. In time, people forgot the scandal, but they didn't forget the video. The woman who stood between a disabled man and 2 guards had become something more than a headline. She had become proof that sometimes the truth just takes longer to find its voice. On a quiet evening, Eleanor and Micah sat on a wooden bench just outside the Lily House. The garden was in bloom. Soft lavender, white lilies, and sunflowers stretching toward the last light of day. Children laughed in the distance. Someone was playing guitar near the kitchen, and the smell of fresh bread floated through the air. Micah glanced at Eleanor, who looked peaceful for the first time in years, not polished, not guarded, just present. He turned slightly toward her. "You gave me a second chance back then. No questions asked. No expectations." Eleanor smiled faintly, eyes still on the horizon. "I didn't think it was a big deal." "It was to me," he said quietly. "You didn't just save me from a bad day. You interrupted my freefall. You reminded me I still had value. And now, I've just tried to do the same for you." She looked at him then, her eyes a little glassy. "I don't know if I deserved it." "Everyone deserves one second chance," he replied. "Some people just need someone brave enough to give it to them." They sat in silence after that, letting the evening wrap around them like a soft blanket. Later, a camera zoomed out slowly from that same garden. The bench, the flowers, the people moving quietly in the background, all still, all real. And as the screen began to fade to black, Eleanor's voice echoed over the final image, steady and calm. "Sometimes, the smallest kindness plants a seed that will one day grow into your salvation." Then silence, fade out. Today you'll hear a remarkable story about how a billionaire's daughter fell in love with a man her family considered unworthy, a man who saved her little brother's life. It's a story about love, sacrifice, and the price of freedom. Subscribe to my channel, leave a like, and drop a comment. For every new subscriber, I'll donate $1 to a charity that helps children in need. Amelia Duvall was born into a world that most people only see in magazines: sprawling mansions, private jets, designer clothes, and events with names you only whisper when you speak of power. Her father, Leonard Duvall, was the king of that world. He owned one of the most prestigious hotel empires in the country. His name opened doors, his signature made fortunes, and his voice, calm, cold, and absolute, decided everything in their lives. To outsiders, Amelia had it all. But the truth, she was a prisoner with silk cuffs. From the moment she could speak, every step of her life had been orchestrated. What school she attended, what music she listened to, who she could be friends with, even what color she dyed her hair. Everything had to reflect the Duvall legacy. Their home, a marble fortress on the cliffs of the Pacific, had over 20 rooms, yet Amelia often found herself locked away in just one, her own. The security guards weren't just for show. Her outings were scheduled, her friends screened, and any deviation was reported to her father immediately. The only time Amelia felt truly human was with her younger brother, Henry. He was only 8 years old, and already fighting his third serious illness. He was born with a fragile immune system, and every cold could turn into a crisis. But he was bright, curious, and full of strange little jokes that only he and Amelia understood. Sometimes, she would sneak into his room late at night, crawl under the covers, and just hold him while he whispered, "Emmy, when I get better, can we go to the zoo again? Just you and me, no drivers, no bodyguards." She always replied the same way, "Of course, monkey, you'll sit on my shoulders the whole time, and we'll feed all the giraffes." He would giggle, then cough, and she'd pull him closer, wishing she could give him just one normal day. Their mother had passed away 5 years earlier, and since then, Leonard had only become more distant. He wasn't cruel. He just believed everything had a price, even affection. He loved his children the way he ran his empire, with strict rules and quarterly results. He would call Amelia into his office and ask, "How are your grades? What did your tutor say? Did you follow the itinerary I had planned?" Not once did he ask if she was happy. Amelia had learned to smile in public, nod in interviews, and obey silently. But deep inside, something was beginning to shift, a sense of restlessness, like the walls were moving closer. She had dreams now, vivid, wild ones, where she was standing in the rain, laughing, dancing barefoot in a field, holding hands with someone she couldn't see clearly. She didn't know it yet, but life was about to throw a crack in her golden cage, and through that crack, something real would shine in. But not before everything she thought was safe, everything she had been told to value, would be tested to the breaking point. Because when your whole life is built on rules, it only takes one act of heart to tear it all down. The day began like any other in the Duval estate. Too quiet, too polished. But Amelia had woken with a strange feeling in her chest. A tightness she couldn't explain. It followed her as she dressed, lingered through breakfast, and didn't go away, even when Henry burst into her room, with his usual grin, asking if they could play pirates on the balcony again. They weren't allowed, of course. Not without 2 guards watching and a safety harness. But by noon everything cracked. It started with a scream, not from Amelia, not from a servant, but from the gatehouse. Then chaos. Henry had somehow slipped away from the guards during a routine walk in the garden. No one knew how. No one imagined he'd run that far. But something had made him bolt toward the side road, just beyond the trees. Maybe he wanted to see the beach. Maybe he just wanted to feel like a normal kid, even for 5 minutes. By the time Amelia heard the commotion and rushed outside, all she saw was the empty leash of his small dog, swinging near the hedge. A moment later came the sickening sound of brakes, too late, followed by a hollow thud. Her blood went cold. Henry had been hit. By the time she reached the road, he was lying crumpled on the pavement, a thin stream of blood pooling beneath his small head. The driver, a dark SUV, had already sped off, without stopping. People screamed. The guards froze. But one man moved. He wasn't in a suit, he wasn't carrying a walkie-talkie, just jeans, sneakers, and a worn blue jacket. He dropped his coffee on the pavement, and ran straight to the boy, kneeling beside him with calm, precise urgency, pressure on the wound. Fingers at the pulse, quick, decisive action. Amelia collapsed beside him, breathless, panicked, tears already pouring down her cheeks. "Is he breathing?" "Barely," the man said, eyes focused. "What's his name?" "Henry. He's 8. Please, please help him." The man pulled off his jacket, folding it beneath the boy's head. He glanced at her only once, his eyes fierce, but steady. "Stay with me." "Hold his hand. Don't let him drift." Amelia obeyed, clutching Henry's small fingers, whispering his name, begging him to open his eyes. The stranger worked fast, stabilizing the neck, slowing the bleeding from the leg, speaking into someone's phone, giving exact coordinates. He sounded like someone used to emergencies, someone who'd seen worse. Minutes later, the ambulance arrived. Amelia tried to go with them, but the paramedics hesitated, until the man nodded. "She's his sister. She's coming." Inside the ambulance, hands still trembling, she turned to the man. "Who are you?" "Noah. Noah Carter. I'm a doctor at the East Side Free Clinic." "Free Clinic? Free Clinic?" she echoed, surprised. That place was miles away, in the rougher part of the city. "Yeah, I was just grabbing lunch when I saw the car hit him. Lucky I did." "Lucky," she whispered, but her heart said something else. Fate. At the hospital, everything blurred. Machines, doctors, paperwork, tests. Noah stayed. He wasn't on duty, he didn't have to, but he waited, leaning against a wall, quietly giving advice when nurses seemed unsure, never once asking for credit. Later, when the surgeons confirmed Henry would survive, Amelia cried again, this time from relief. She found Noah in the waiting room, sitting alone, sipping bad coffee from a vending machine. She walked over, still in her designer coat, but suddenly feeling like a stranger in her own skin. "Thank you," she said softly. "You don't need to," he replied. "I'd do it again. Why, you don't even know us." He looked up, studied her for a moment. "I didn't need to know. He's a kid. That's enough." She sat down beside him, something inside her cracking wide open. In that moment, Surrounded by sterile white walls and fluorescent lights, Amelia realized something terrifying and beautiful. This man, a stranger, had done more for her brother in 5 minutes than most people in her life had done in years, and when their eyes met again, something silent passed between them. Recognition, not of names, but of souls. She didn't know it yet, but nothing in her life would be the same again, not after Noah Carter. Noah hadn't expected to see her again, after the chaos of that day, after the ambulance, the hospital, and the long sigh of relief. When the boy had stabilized, he assumed Amelia Duval would vanish back into her world, the world of penthouses, security teams, and designer lives, untouched by anything real. But a week later, she walked into the East Side Free Clinic, dressed not in silk, but in a simple blouse and jeans. She looked out of place, like a porcelain figurine, dropped into a mechanic's garage. Noah saw her before she saw him. He was helping an older man with a wrapped foot when she stepped into the waiting area, holding a box of something, vitamins, maybe, or donations. He finished with his patient and approached slowly. "Miss Duval," he said, a little guarded. "Did you get lost?" Amelia smiled, but there was hesitation in her eyes. "No. I'm here for a reason." He folded his arms. "Let me guess. Charity." She flushed slightly. "Yes, and no. I wanted to thank you again. But also, I wanted to see where you work. I brought supplies. And I asked around. You're underfunded." He gave a short laugh. "Underfunded is polite. We're a band-aid on a bullet wound here." "Then let me help," she said quickly. "I can talk to my father's foundation. We can." He cut her off gently. "Look, I appreciate the thought, but I've been in this game a while. Rich people don't usually show up unless there's a photo op, or guilt." Her voice was quiet. "It's not guilt." "Then what is it?" She didn't answer, because even she didn't know. Not entirely. All she knew was that something shifted in her the day Noah saved Henry, and now, being near him, felt like breathing real air for the first time. He didn't push. He just nodded, turned, and walked her through the clinic, the peeling walls, the too small pharmacy, the staff who hadn't taken a proper break in weeks. He showed her the records they kept on paper, because the system was outdated. The waiting list for kids with asthma, the shelves of expired equipment they still tried to use. Amelia listened, asked questions, took notes, and then she came back. Not just once, not with a film crew, not for credit. She came with supplies. She helped reorganize the filing cabinet. She even cleaned storage rooms. The staff stared at her in disbelief at first, but slowly began to smile when she arrived. So did Noah, though he tried to hide it. Still, he remained cautious, not rude, but distant, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. One day, as they sat outside the clinic during a break, Amelia offered him a sandwich she'd made. He raised an eyebrow. "Turkey, tofu," she said with a laugh. "I didn't think you were the turkey type." "You're not exactly the tofu type either." "Maybe I'm still figuring out who I am." They ate in silence for a minute before she spoke again. "Do you always push people away? Only the ones who show up in $1,000 shoes?" She glanced at her sneakers. These were $30. He smirked. Progress. There was something in her eyes that day. Not just admiration, not just gratitude. It was softer, warmer. And Noah noticed. He didn't want to. He'd built walls around himself. The clinic was his mission, his shield. The world Amelia came from had only ever brought him disappointment, broken promises, and people who smiled with empty eyes. But she wasn't like them. She listened when he talked about his patients. She showed up when she didn't have to. She didn't ask for anything. One evening, after closing time, They stayed late to sort through medical donations. The light was dim. Their hands touched as they reached for the same clipboard. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. Amelia said quietly, "You don't trust me, do you?" He looked at her. "Really look. I'm trying." She smiled. "And it wasn't polished or perfect. It was real. I'm trying too." And in that moment, in that quiet room, with its flickering lights and dusty floors, something fragile and beautiful began to grow between them. Not built on wealth, not built on heroism, just two people from opposite worlds, seeing each other for who they really were. And slowly, the space between them began to disappear. They should have known. It couldn't stay a secret. For weeks, Emilia had been slipping away, claiming she was volunteering, that she needed space, that she wanted to find her own path. Her father, Charles Duval, had tolerated it at first, even admired what he assumed was a passing phase of noblesse oblige. But powerful men don't like being kept in the dark, especially not when it comes to their daughters. One evening, as the family sat down to dinner in their glass-walled dining room overlooking the harbor, Charles placed his silverware down and said calmly, "Tell me, Emilia, who is Noah Carter?" Her breath caught. Beside her, Henry froze mid-bite. She tried to stay composed. "He's a doctor. He runs a clinic." Charles's voice hardened. "I know exactly what he runs, and I know exactly what you've been doing." He stood, the calm shattered. "You think I'd let my daughter throw away her name for some nobody patching up drug addicts in a slum?" Emilia stood too, trembling, but defiant. "He saved Henry's life. And now, he's using you." "That's not true." "He doesn't love you, Emilia. He wants your last name, your access, your money." She tried to speak, but Charles raised a hand. "I'm not letting some street doctor sink his claws into you." The next morning, Noah received a visit. A man in a tailored suit stood in the clinic's doorway, holding a briefcase and a soft smile. "My client would like to thank you for your service and offer you a gesture of goodwill. In return, he'd appreciate it if you distanced yourself from Miss Duval." Noah didn't let him finish. "Get out." The man didn't even flinch. "It's a generous offer, a donation to your clinic. Enough to fund you for years." Noah's voice was low. "Tell him I don't take bribes, and I don't disappear on command." The man nodded, adjusted his cufflinks, and left. That same week, the clinic was hit with 3 surprise inspections. Health code violations, half of them fabricated, were documented in thick reports. City officials cited unsafe practices, threatened to revoke licenses. Then came the headlines. "Doctor with a dark past, clinic under investigation." They dug up Noah's college records, took quotes out of context. One article even implied he'd once stolen medication, an accusation proven false years ago, but now twisted into a smear campaign. Patients stopped coming, donors pulled out, staff were harassed online. Inside the clinic, the silence grew heavier each day. Amelia visited one evening and found Noah alone, sitting in the dim light, staring at a closed file. She rushed to him. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know my father would go this far." Noah didn't look at her. "Of course he did. I'll fight it. I'll tell the press. I'll pull." He finally turned to her, eyes tired. "You don't understand. He doesn't need to prove anything. Just casting doubt is enough. This place runs on hope and thread. And now, no one trusts me." Amelia knelt beside him. "Then we'll start over. Somewhere else." He looked at her like she'd just offered to move the moon. "You'd leave all that behind?" "I don't want any of it without you." But even as she said it, A voice echoed in her head, her mother's voice, from years ago. Our name is a responsibility, Amelia. You don't get to live for yourself, you live for legacy. The weight of that legacy pressed down like a stone. Days passed. Her father doubled down, not with rage, now, but with manipulation. He sat her down in the garden where she used to play as a child, and spoke in soft tones. You think this is love? It's not. He's clever, I'll give him that. But he'll hurt you, he already has. Look around, you can't fix what this has broken. Amelia turned away, tears stinging her eyes. He kept going. You walk away from this family, and you lose everything. Your home, your security, even Henry. I won't let you drag him through this mess. It was the cruelest blow, and so she found herself standing at a crossroads she never imagined. On one side, her family, the life she'd always known, her brother, on the other. The man who'd shown her what it meant to live with purpose. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. Torn between duty and love, Amelia stood suspended in a storm of silence, watching the two worlds she belonged to begin pulling each other apart. Noah didn't hear from her again. Not the next day. Not the next week. The phone stayed silent. The door never opened. The clinic, once filled with warmth and chaotic kindness, now echoed with absence. At first, he tried to tell himself she just needed time, that she was figuring things out, that maybe, just maybe, she was fighting behind the scenes. But with each passing day, hope grew quieter. Then cold. The clinic, meanwhile, bled out slowly. Every week brought new letters. More inspections, finance, legal threats. Donations had dried up. Patients were afraid to be seen there now. Some left apologizing. Others just stopped showing up. His nurses and volunteers, loyal but worn thin, began to leave one by one. Noah sat in the office most days, staring at charts no one would read, treating fewer and fewer people, until finally there were none. By the end of the month, the lights in the hallway flickered out, and no one came to fix them. He stopped fixing them too. In the corner of the office stood a plant Emilia had once brought, small, bright, a ridiculous gift she had said was supposed to represent hope. It was dying now. Like everything else. Noah didn't water it. He didn't care. He slept on the cot in the back room now. Not because he had no home, but because he didn't want to go back to a place where she had once laughed in his kitchen, where her voice still lingered in the silence. Some nights he'd stare at the ceiling, hearing her say his name, imagining her knocking on the door, but no one ever came. Noah Carter, the man who had once held pressure on a bleeding boy's chest with a steady hand, now couldn't hold himself together. Meanwhile, in the Duval estate, the curtains remained closed. The sun never quite touched Emilia's skin, the way it used to. Her world was silent, sterile, and made of marble. She moved through the mansion like a ghost. She ate dinner alone, walked the halls like a prisoner. Her father thought it was over, thought he had protected the family name, and maybe he had. On paper, everything was intact, but inside, something had crumbled. Her room was filled with things she no longer touched. Jewelry, silk, perfume, but all she ever looked at was one photograph. It wasn't posed, just a candid shot someone at the clinic had taken. Noah standing by the medicine shelf, arms crossed, laughing as she leaned against the wall with a clipboard. Her eyes looked happy. Real. She kept the photo hidden in a book on her nightstand. Every night, she opened it. And every night, her eyes blurred before she could finish looking. One evening, Henry wandered into her room. He was stronger now, walking better, still pale, but improving. He stood by the door quietly, watching her wipe her eyes. "Why do you cry every night?" Emilia froze. She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she had too many. She tried to smile. I'm just tired. He sat beside her on the bed. Is it about that man? The one who saved me. She nodded slowly. I miss him. Did he stop loving you? Amelia almost laughed. It was the most honest question anyone had asked her in weeks. No, I left. To protect him. But Henry frowned. Then why does it feel like you're the one who got hurt? Amelia couldn't reply. The next morning, she sat in the garden alone, the photograph in her lap. Birds chirped. A breeze moved the leaves. Somewhere deep inside her, something started to ache again. Not the pain of loss, but the pull of choice. She had let go. She had walked away, but why did it feel like she was the one being erased? Back at the clinic, Noah stood in the hallway, staring at the dark, empty rooms. The lease would expire in a month. The final inspection was due next week. And after that, nothing. No one had to shut the place down. It was already gone. So was she. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. The Duval estate, always controlled and rehearsed, suddenly broke into chaos. Servants screamed. The butler dropped a tray. Amelia, descending the stairs, froze as she saw two guards rush into her father's study. Within minutes, an ambulance had been called. The powerful, unshakable Laurent Duval, master of empires, feared by rivals, was lying on the floor, clutching his chest, his face pale and drenched in sweat. The paramedics arrived quickly. He was stabilized and transported to the private family hospital within the hour. And yet, nothing worked. They brought in the best specialists, cardiologists from Switzerland, surgeons from New York, all of them with resumes, as long as novels, all of them paid with quiet wires and confidential retainers, and still, no answers. The blockage was too deep, his body too strained. The medications weren't responding. By the third day, silence took over the hospital room. Machines beeped in cold rhythm. Amelia stood at the window, staring at a pale sky, her fingers trembling. Then Henry, quiet, pale little Henry, looked up from the foot of the bed and whispered, "Where is the doctor who saved me?" Amelia turned to him.
What?
That doctor? The one who made the blood stop, the one who smiled at me, and didn't talk like I was made of glass. No one replied. He looked at her again. He saved me. Why not him? The question hit like lightning. Lightning. For a moment, no one in the room moved. Then Amelia walked out without a word. She didn't grab her bag, didn't wait for a car. She walked to the staff parking lot, got into a dusty sedan, meant for errands, and drove herself toward the edge of the city. The streets grew rougher, louder, more real. She hadn't been here since the last time she saw him, since she left without saying goodbye. The clinic was still standing, but it looked abandoned. She knocked. No one answered. She opened the door. The lights were off, but she heard footsteps in the back. She followed the sound until she saw him. Noah, standing by a file cabinet, sorting through old patient folders. He didn't look surprised to see her. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. Finally, she spoke. "My father is dying." Noah didn't react. "They've tried everything. Every specialist. They can't fix it. I don't know why, but I thought of you." Still, he said nothing. "Henry asked for you. He remembers you. So do I." She paused. "Please, I know I don't deserve anything. I left. I broke you. But right now, none of that matters. He's not just my father. He's Henry's whole world." Noah looked at her. His eyes held no anger, no warmth, just a depth of silence that felt heavier than hate. Then, finally, he closed the file drawer. What hospital? He arrived, 2 hours later. No grand entrance. No attention. Just walked in, wearing old shoes and a worn jacket. At first, the other doctors protested. "Who is he? This is unauthorized." But when Amelia whispered his name, and when the hospital director recognized it, the room fell silent. Noah didn't waste time. He studied the scans, reviewed the medications, made 2 calls, and demanded one procedure immediately. A catheter, not the standard one, a specific variation only a handful of surgeons in the country had trained for. He performed it himself. 2 nurses fainted watching. Another one cried when she saw the monitor flatline and then spike back into rhythm. Hours passed when he finally stepped out of the operating room. Amelia was sitting on the bench, with her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles had turned white. She stood. He looked at her and spoke calmly. "He'll live, but he needs weeks of recovery. No business. No stress." Then he turned to leave. Amelia's voice broke as she called out, "Noah." He paused, but didn't turn back. "Thank you." He nodded once, then kept walking, back down the hallway, back into the shadows, back toward the life he had learned to live without her. The room was quiet, softer than any silence that had come before. Laurent Duval sat upright for the first time in days. Wires still clung to his chest. Machines still hummed beside him. But there was color in his face again, strength slowly returning to his limbs. Noah stood by the window, arms crossed, ready to leave. Laurent's voice broke the quiet. "You saved my life." Noah didn't move. "I don't say that easily. I don't say that ever. But I owe you something. Say what you want. Money. A clinic. A name in the right circle." Noah turned to him. His voice was calm, flat, almost weary. "I don't want anything." Laurent's brow furrowed. "Everyone wants something." Noah looked at Amelia, who stood in the corner, unsure whether to breathe. "I didn't do it for you," Noah said. "I did it for her." A long silence followed. The kind of silence that lands like a weight on the floor and cannot be swept away. Laurent looked at his daughter. For once he didn't reply. No argument. No commands. Just a long, tired stare. Amelia didn't flinch. Noah left that afternoon. No one tried to stop him. A year passed. Everything changed, though not all at once. Laurent Duval survived, but something inside him had shifted. He no longer stormed into boardrooms or crushed negotiations with a glance. He stopped appearing on the evening news. The world of power grew quieter around him. And Amelia, she stepped into her own light. She resigned from the family firm, refused the summer estates and the gala invitations, moved into a small apartment above the city. Not poor, but no longer surrounded by wealth either. She started a foundation, the Duval Medical Access Fund. Her name helped, but it wasn't what defined it. What defined it was how she worked. Long hours. Paperwork. Real families. Real kids. She fought for clinics to stay open. She paid for medication. She visited waiting rooms where no one wore designer shoes. She never talked about Noah. Not once. But his name lived in the hallway of the foundation's first building, carved into the corner of a plaque that read, "For those who heal without asking anything in return." One late afternoon, just after sunset, Amelia left a city hospital after reviewing a program renewal. She was tired, but it was the good kind of tired. The kind that reminded her she was useful. She descended the stairs with her coat in hand, her hair wind-blown, her eyes still carrying the weight of one too many cases. Then she saw him, sitting on the porch bench, legs crossed, jacket too light for the weather, a file in his lap, looking up at the sky like it had something to say. "Noah." She stopped walking. He looked over. Their eyes met. Neither of them smiled. Not right away. It was something more than a smile, something quieter, deeper, more complete. He stood. You still work too late, he said. And you still never call ahead, she replied. They both paused. So, she began, not knowing how to finish. He nodded toward the building. One of my patients is in there. Thought I'd wait before heading back. Long drive, not really. Just long enough to think about things. She looked down, then back at him. You look the same, she said. You don't, he replied. She blinked. You look stronger. A pause. They both stood in silence as the wind moved past them. For the first time in a long time, there were no headlines, no orders, no eyes watching from dark cars. He stepped closer. This time, there was no father to call her back. This time, there were no lies to protect, no reputations to shield, no debts to repay, only them, and that porch, and the late light of a new beginning. Today's story is about a young woman named Olena, who inherits a treasured family heirloom, an antique clock that has stood in her family for generations. This clock stopped ticking after her grandmother passed away. Determined to preserve the memory of her grandmother and her family's legacy, Olena decides to have the clock repaired. What follows is a journey filled with unexpected discoveries and heartfelt moments. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, and leave your comments below. For every new subscriber, I will donate $1 to a charity that helps those in need. Olena had always known about the clock. It was a beautiful piece, tall, wooden, carved with delicate patterns, and its pendulum swung gracefully, marking the passing of time for decades in her grandmother's old house. When her grandmother passed away, the clock fell silent. It seemed as if time itself had stopped. After the funeral, Olena was the sole heir to her grandmother's belongings. Among the things she inherited, the clock stood out not just for its appearance, but for the memories it carried. Every time she looked at it, she remembered the stories her grandmother told her about their family, the love and hardships passed down through generations. One chilly autumn morning, Olena stood in her apartment, staring at the clock that had been carefully transported from her grandmother's house. She gently touched its wooden frame, feeling the coolness beneath her fingers. I want to hear you tick again, she thought softly. I want to keep the memories alive. Olena did not know much about clock repair, but she was determined to find someone who could restore the old heirloom. She opened her laptop and started searching for clockmakers in her city. After reading several reviews, she found the contact information of a watchmaker named Dimitro, known for his careful and skilled restoration work. She hesitated for a moment, then picked up the phone and dialed the number. "Hello, this is Olena," she said. When Dimitro answered, "I have an old family clock that stopped working after my grandmother's passing. I would like to know if you can repair it." There was a brief pause before Dimitro replied with a calm and confident voice. "Of course, antique clocks require special care, but I enjoy working with them. If you can bring it in, I'll take a look and tell you what can be done." Relieved, Olena arranged a meeting for the next day. She felt a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness. This clock was more than just a timepiece. It was a symbol of her family's history and love. The next afternoon, Olena carefully carried the clock to Dimitro's small workshop on a quiet street. The walls were lined with clocks of all sizes and ages, each with its own story. Dimitro greeted her with a warm smile and invited her inside. As he examined the clock, his eyes reflected a respect for the craftsmanship and history it held. "This clock has character," he said. "It's seen many years, and probably many hands that took care of it. Repairing it will be challenging but rewarding." Olena watched him work, feeling a mix of hope and curiosity. Little did she know, this repair would mark the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. The metro arrived promptly the next morning. He was a young man, in his late 20s, with an easy smile and a quiet confidence that made Olena feel at ease right away. He introduced himself simply, saying he was from a small town not far from the city, and that repairing clocks had been his passion since childhood. As he carefully took the antique clock from Olena's hands, he examined it closely, running his fingers over the woodwork and inspecting the delicate clock face. His eyes sparkled with admiration and respect for the craftsmanship. "This is a fine piece," he said, thoughtfully. "Restoring it will take time and patience. Some parts are worn down, and the mechanism is quite complex, but it's worth every effort." Olena nodded, watching as he began to carefully disassemble the clock, setting each tiny gear and spring aside with expert precision. As Dimitro worked, a quiet conversation began between them. He spoke of his hometown, a small place, where life moved slowly but simply, where everyone knew each other and family meant everything. He shared stories of his grandfather, who taught him how to repair watches and clocks, passing down skills that had become part of who he was. Olena listened intently, fascinated not only by his skill but by the warmth in his voice and the gentle way he spoke about his family. In return, she told him about her own grandmother, about the stories passed down through generations and the special meaning this clock held for her. The more they talked, the more Olena felt a connection growing between them, a feeling she had not expected. She caught herself stealing glances at Dimitro as he worked, his focused expression, the way his hands moved with care and precision. There was something honest and sincere about him that drew her in. But she kept her feelings hidden, unsure if this was just a fleeting attraction or something deeper. When the repair took longer than expected, Dimitro suggested she come back the next day to check on the progress. Olena agreed, eager to see the clock coming back to life, but also to spend more time with the young man who had so quickly become important to her. Each day brought small moments of shared smiles, quiet jokes, and stories exchanged over the hum of tiny gears turning. The clock was no longer just an object in need of repair. It was a bridge between two lives, slowly weaving them closer together, and though neither said it out loud, both felt that this was only the beginning of something much bigger than a simple clock restoration. As Dimitro continued his delicate work on the antique clock, carefully removing each gear and spring, his fingers brushed against something unusual, a thin, folded envelope hidden deep within the wooden frame. He paused, curiosity immediately sparked, and gently extracted the small aged paper. Olena looked over his shoulder, her breath catching as she saw the envelope, worn with time but still intact. Dimitro carefully unfolded the letter inside, revealing neat handwriting in faded ink. The letter was addressed to Olena, though it was dated many years ago, and signed by her grandmother. As Dimitro read the letter aloud quietly, Olena's heart began to race. In the letter, her grandmother wrote about a secret, a document hidden somewhere, containing truths about the family's inheritance, more than just the clock and the old house. It hinted at a legacy that had been kept from everyone, perhaps to protect Olena, or to hide something valuable. The letter spoke in riddles, suggesting that the inheritance was tied to a legal paper that had never been revealed. It warned Olena to be cautious, as there were those who might try to claim what was hers by dishonest means. Olena felt a mix of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and a growing unease. She had always believed the family story was simple: the clock, the house, memories. But now doubts crept in. Could there really be more? Was her grandmother hiding something important all along? She looked at Dimitro, searching for answers in his calm eyes. He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of the discovery. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "We need to find that document, but carefully. There could be people who don't want it found." Olena swallowed hard, her mind racing with questions and fears. The quiet project of repairing a clock had suddenly turned into a journey into the unknown, filled with secrets and risks. Yet, despite the uncertainty, she felt a strange strength growing inside her. She wasn't alone. With Dimitro's steady presence beside her, Maybe she could uncover the truth and protect her family's legacy, no matter what it took. Olena and Dmytro knew that the discovery of the hidden letter was only the beginning. Determined to uncover the truth behind her family's secret, they began their search for information together. The small town's library, dusty archives, and old courthouse records became their second home. Every document, every old photo, every faded note was scrutinized with care. What they found was far more complicated than they had imagined. The family inheritance was tied not only to the clock and the house but to legal documents that could open the door to a significant fortune. But with wealth came danger. The deeper Olena and Dmytro dug, the clearer it became that someone else was already trying to claim what was rightfully hers, and using dishonest means to do so. One afternoon, as they examined a particularly old legal file, a name appeared again and again, a distant relative who had suddenly shown interest in the property. Rumors whispered among the townspeople suggested this relative was no stranger to shady deals and was known for ruthless tactics. Olena's heart sank. This was no longer just about family memories, it was a battle for her future. "We need to be careful," Dmytro warned, as he closed the file slowly. "This is more than just paperwork, it's about power and control. If they find out we're looking, they won't hesitate to stop us." Olena nodded, her resolve hardening. "I can't believe someone in my own family would do this, but you're right, we can't trust anyone else." They realized that every phone call might be listened to, every meeting watched. The danger was real, creeping closer with every step they took toward the truth. Despite the fear, they refused to back down. Instead, they grew closer, bound by a shared purpose and the trust that had blossomed between them. In a world full of uncertainty, they had only each other. As night fell over the quiet town, Olena looked at Dmytro and said softly, "I'm glad you're here with me. Whatever happens, we face it together." Dmytro smiled, a steady calm in his eyes, "Always. No matter what comes next." As the days passed, Olena and Dmytro's bond grew stronger. What had begun as a simple meeting over an old clock had transformed into something deeper. A connection built on trust, shared secrets, and growing affection. Their conversations stretched late into the night, filled with dreams of a future together, away from the shadows threatening her family legacy. But the world around them grew darker. Threatening letters arrived at Olena's doorstep, messages warning her to stop digging into the past. One evening, as she walked home, a stranger's eyes followed her from across the street. The feeling of being watched settled like a weight on her chest. Then came the police involvement. At first, it seemed routine. Questions about the property, about claims others were making, but soon, it became clear that someone was manipulating the system to intimidate Olena. The authorities pressed her with accusations she knew were false, hoping to scare her into giving up. Adding to the turmoil were the betrayals from those she had once trusted. Close relatives she had counted on suddenly distanced themselves, or even sided with those trying to claim the inheritance. Olena's world felt like it was crumbling. One quiet afternoon, sitting in the small cafe where they often met, Olena confessed to Dmytro the turmoil inside her. "I don't know what to do anymore," she said softly. "This fight is tearing everything apart. Maybe it's better to leave it all behind. Run away with you and forget this mess." Dmytro reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "I'm not going anywhere," he said firmly. "And neither should you. This is your family's truth, you're right, I'll fight with you. For us, for our future." Olena looked into his eyes and saw the unwavering resolve that matched her own. But the choice was hers alone. To fight meant risking everything: safety, relationships, even their newfound love. To run meant leaving behind the past, but also the chance for justice and closure. The night before a crucial meeting that could decide the fate of the inheritance, Olena sat alone, torn between fear and hope. Memories of her grandmother, the ticking of the old clock now repaired, and Dimitro's steady presence filled her thoughts. In the end, she knew what she had to do. For her family, for the truth, and for the love that had blossomed in the face of danger. When morning came, Olena was ready. Whatever awaited them, they would face it together, united, stronger, and unafraid. The tension that had built over weeks finally reached its breaking point. Olena and Dimitro stood before the courtroom, surrounded by faces from their past, some familiar, some unexpected. The secret hidden for generations was about to be revealed. Inside the packed room, documents were laid out, testimonies given, and the truth unfolded, piece by piece. The hidden will, concealed in the envelope, found within the old clock, clearly established Olena's rightful claim to the family estate. It exposed the attempts by the distant relative to manipulate and unlawfully seize what did not belong to them. But the victory came, not without a price. During the legal battle, Olena had to confront painful truths about those she once trusted. Some family ties were severed forever. The stress weighed heavily on her, and Dimitro alike. There were moments when doubt and fear crept in, threatening to overwhelm their spirit. Still, throughout every challenge, they held tightly to one another. Their love, forged in the heat of conflict and strengthened by shared struggles, became their sanctuary. After the final verdict was announced, granting Olena full ownership and peace of mind, they returned home to the quiet ticking of the restored family clock. Its steady rhythm filled the room. With a comforting presence, Olena reached out and gently touched the clock's face, a smile spreading across her lips. This clock, once silent and still, was now alive again. Just like their journey. It was more than just an heirloom, it was a symbol of resilience, of time's passage, and of new beginnings. Dimitro stood beside her, his eyes reflecting the same hope and determination. "We made it through," he said quietly. "Not just the fight, but everything else. Together." Olena nodded, feeling the weight of the past lifting. "Yes," she replied. "Our true wealth isn't in the estate or the money. It's in this. The trust, the love, and the courage to face the unknown." As the sun set outside, casting warm light through the window, they knew their story was only just beginning. Whatever the future held, they would face it side by side, stronger and united. The old clock ticked on, marking the start of their new life. A life filled with promise, hope, and a love that had weathered every storm.
Mabel hadn't mowed the lawn in weeks. Weeds crawled over the stone path, and the old porch swing creaked in the wind, like a memory of a time when the house was filled with laughter. Now, there was only silence, dust, and an old woman who brewed a single cup of coffee every morning and stared into the empty guest room. That's where the portrait of her late husband George stood. Stern eyes, a perfect side part, and a Marine's uniform. A man she had never loved, but lived with all her life. That day she was standing by the window when she saw the boy, a black teenager, in a plain t-shirt, holding a trimmer, mowing the neighbor's lawn. His movements were calm and confident. Mabel watched him for a long time, then stepped outside. "Hey boy!" she called. "Want a few more dollars? My yard needs trimming too." The boy stopped, wiped his forehead, and walked over. And in that moment, Mabel lost her words. He looked like George. Not the George in the portrait, but the George she saw only once, at their wedding. Young George! Or, no, she knew that face better than any other. It was Reggie, her first and only true love. A black boy she had secretly dated when she was 18. The boy her father called a disgrace and a threat. The boy she never saw again after her father drove her out of town. His eyes, those same warm deep eyes, now looked back at her. Mabel nearly lost her balance. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, steadying her by the elbow. She didn't answer right away. She only whispered, "What's your name?" "Jamal," he said. Jamal rose. Mabel sat down on the bench. Her hands trembled. Her breathing grew shallow. Images spun in her mind. Beach evenings. Reggie's whispers. His promise to run away with her, and the sight of his back as he walked away for the last time. This boy. It couldn't be, but he was like a ghost from the past. And she had to know the truth. She invited Jamal in for lemonade. He hesitated but agreed. They sat on the porch, and Mabel studied every feature of his face, his nose, his cheekbones, even his smile. It was Reggie's smile. "Are you from around here, Jamal?" she asked. "Yeah. Born down south. But my mom moved us to Detroit. I'm back for the summer, just trying to earn a little cash." "And your mom? What's her name?" "Linda. Linda. 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 Rose. She passed a long time ago. She always said she didn't know who my father was. He left before I was born." The name meant nothing to Mabel, but the story it hit her like a brick. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them with a napkin. "You never tried to find him?" she asked softly. Jamal shrugged. "Thought about it a lot, but all I have is an old photo, from my mom, and a letter. A weird one. I never really understood it. A letter. Do you have it?" "It's in my backpack. In the car. I can grab it." Mabel nodded silently. A few minutes later, Jamal returned with a yellowed envelope. She unfolded the paper, and froze. It was handwriting she recognized. Reggie used to write to her the same way. "If you're reading this, I'm already gone. But I'll always be with you. She must never know. I can't ruin her life. But know this, you are my heart. And you must be strong." Mabel felt the world disappear around her. She clutched the letter and whispered, "Reggie?" Her voice was so faint that Jamal barely heard it. "Did you say something?" "No. Nothing," she replied. "Just, this letter. I think I know who your father was." And in that moment she realized her whole life had been a lie. And that the boy in front of her, he wasn't just someone who looked like Reggie. He might be her grandson. But Mabel didn't know that someone else in town was watching Jamal. And that person knew the whole truth. At night Mabel couldn't sleep. She sat in a chair, wrapped in a blanket, and looked at the old letter she held in her lap. Her fingers traced the lines Reggie had written as if they were wounds that hadn't healed. It was obvious Reggie had a son. And this son was Jamal's father. But why had Reggie never told her? Why had he disappeared so suddenly? And who was Linda Rose? She had never heard that name, even though she had once known Reggie's life down to the last second. Jamal came back the next day. He was wearing the same plain t-shirt, his hands covered in oil. He had been helping old Mr. Clark with his car. But as soon as he saw Mabel on the porch, he smiled, and she felt his heart clench again. They sat down on the porch again. "I've been thinking about that letter," he said, "and about what you said. Do you really know anything?" Mabel nodded, but before she answered, she looked across the street. There, in the parked gray car, sat a man in a hat. She had seen him before, a week ago, and here he was again. "Jamal, do you know anyone from who could be following you?" "What?" "There, in the car. This isn't the first time he's been here." The boy turned, and for the first time his smile faded. I don't know, but I saw this man under my dorm in Detroit. Twice. I thought it was a coincidence." Mabel felt a chill on her skin. Something was wrong. She didn't know what secret this boy carried, but it was obvious he was being watched, and maybe not just out of curiosity. After the gray sedan had disappeared around the corner, Mabel closed the door of the house and turned the key. For the first time in years, she felt real fear, but there was also determination in her eyes now. She had to find out more, not just for herself, for Jamal, and maybe to make up for old mistakes. She went up to the attic. Among the dust, cobwebs, and old boxes, She found a wooden box. She hadn't opened it since George died. Inside were letters, newspaper clippings, and one unstamped envelope that said, "Do not open unless ready for the truth." With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was another letter, from George, and she couldn't believe her eyes. "Mabel, if you're reading this, then I can't protect you anymore. I found out about Reggie. I knew everything before we got married. I ruined his life because I could. I thought I was saving you from disgrace. But, now I know I did the worst. He begged for a chance. I sent him to the army. On the front lines, where he died. I'm sorry. I've been afraid all my life that the truth would come out. And maybe it has. Forgive me, if you can." Mabel covered her face with her hands. Her husband had destroyed her love. He had robbed her of a future. And now, decades later, she held this letter in her hands. Late. But the truth. She knew Jamal had to know this. But she also understood. The truth was not just an answer. It was pain. And it was danger. Especially when someone like the one in the gray car was still guarding old secrets. That evening Mabel made tea, set the table on the veranda, and waited. Jamal came as he had promised. But this time he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by a woman. A tall woman, with dark curly hair, and a piercing gaze. She was holding an old photo album. "That's my mother Leon," Jamal said. "She wanted to come alone. When I mentioned Reggie's letter, she turned pale, and she said she had to see you." Mabel froze. Her heart was pounding like a truck engine in the cold, but she invited them to sit down, and before anyone could speak, she took George's letter from her pocket. "I found this letter today," she said, "and it changes everything." Leon picked it up, and began to read. Tears welled up in her eyes. She was silent for a moment, then looked straight at Mabel. "It's not your fault. It wasn't your fault that my father died, but the people who made decisions for others, they didn't know what they were doing. Mom said Reggie was good, but he suspected something. He was sent away because he knew too much." "What did he know?" Mabel asked. "That your husband George wasn't just a lawyer. He was in the Internal Affairs Department, which was responsible for whitewashing scandals. He covered politicians, clergymen, even the military. Reggie was a guard for a general, and he saw more than he should have. He tried to leave. And then, it all began." Mabel felt as if the floor had disappeared from under her feet. "And Jamal?" she whispered. "Why are they watching him?" Liana pulled out a photo. It showed Jamal, a baby in the arms of a man in an army uniform. But the man wasn't Reggie. And it wasn't even George. "This man is Michael Thornton, Reggie's former friend, then enemy. He's alive. And I'm afraid he knows who Jamal is. And he's afraid he'll talk, or find out the truth. They want to make sure no one finds out what happened that night in Panama. The evidence is gone. But Jamal, he's the last piece of what can be erased. And they know it." Mabel shivered. "You're in danger, boy." Jamal stared at the photo, then at Mabel. "If I'm a piece of something, then someone needs me. And maybe it's time to stop running, and give it all back to them." The next morning, Mabel took out a phone book from the old chest. Yellow, tattered, stained by time. She hadn't opened it in a long time. But one name was still clear: Harold Kane, a former private investigator, and also a friend of George's. But not a close one, more like a cautious ally, who knew when to keep quiet, and when to seek the truth. She dialed the number. The rings went on forever, until a hoarse but familiar voice answered on the other end. "Mabel? Damn it. I thought you were already in the nursing home. I thought you were already in the ground, Harold," she replied. "But there's a case. Old. Very old. And very important." Harold arrived 2 hours later. He was carrying a file of documents, and an old camera. When he saw Jamal, he immediately became wary. "Who is it?" "This could be Reggie's grandson," Mabel said. "And Reggie, you remember, didn't just disappear. You said it yourself back then, that things didn't add up there." Harold sat down. He took out an old tape, This is a copy of a video I made in 1985, a military base, Panama. I was there as a technician, and then, I witnessed something I wasn't supposed to see. Mabel stared at the screen. The image was shaky, but she could see a group of soldiers. One of them was definitely Reggie. The other was taller, more stocky. It was Michael Thornton. They were arguing outside the hangar. He said, "I'm not going to keep quiet anymore." And Thornton said, "You've signed your own death sentence, Reggie." 2 days later, his body was found in the water. Officially it was an accident. But I knew it wasn't. I just didn't have the evidence. And I was afraid. Mabel wiped away a tear. And now we have proof. And we have Reggie's grandson. Maybe his only family. Harold looked at Jamal. If you really want the truth, boy, we're going to have to raise the old ghosts. And it's going to be dangerous. Thornton is a senator now. He's got connections. He's got money. And he's not going to let us dig into the past. In peace. Jamal stood up. I'm ready. If my grandfather died for the truth, I'm not going to let it die. They're not going to kill the memory. Not this time. The town was as peaceful as ever. But in the old house, at the end of the street, a storm was raging. Not a physical one, but one that blurred the lines between past and present. Mabel sat with her phone in her hand, reading an article Jamal had just published in the local newspaper. There was a photo on the front page, Reggie in uniform, smiling, and next to it was a copy of his letter, the story they tried to bury. The truth about the death of Private Reggie Rose. The story was called. Inside were excerpts from Harold's video, copies of military reports, Reggie's letter, the testimony of a neighbor who had heard George arguing with someone the night Mabel disappeared for the day, and most importantly, the names. Thornton, George, military conspiracy, racial hatred, betrayal. The explosion was instantaneous. 2 days after the publication, reporters arrived in town. Senator Thornton held a press conference, calling it a fabricated attack. But the next morning, 2 FBI agents came into Jamal's office. They had warrants, names on a list. Old cases were being reopened. Mabel watched it all from the window. She didn't leave the house. She just waited. Until that evening, when Jamal came to her house himself. He was calm. He was holding a box. "What are these?" she asked. "Mom's things. I found another letter among them. But this one wasn't for me. It was for you." Mabel opened the box. She pulled out a yellowed piece of paper. The handwriting was painfully familiar. "Mabel, if you're reading this, you know. I couldn't tell you then. I knew George would kill me if he found out. But I don't regret it. Linda is our daughter. She has your eyes. And I hope, your heart. Forgive me for everything. And love her if you ever meet her." Reggie. Mabel pressed the letter to her chest. Her eyes filled with tears. Everything fell into place. Not only was Jamal her grandson, but Linda was her daughter. The daughter who was taken away, who was never allowed to know who her mother was. "I didn't know," Mabel whispered. Jamal sat down next to her. "But now you know, and we can start again." Together, they sat in silence for a long time. Mabel looked at the old portrait of George, and for the first time she didn't feel afraid. She stood up, took it off the wall, and carefully placed it in a box with her belongings. Time to forget the one who was silent, and remember the one who fought. The sun was rising in the window, and in the yard, a green neatly trimmed lawn, a true symbol of a new beginning.
Today's story is about how a single dad applied for the wrong job and ended up changing his life forever, all because of something he once did without expecting anything in return. It's a story about kindness, struggle, and how the past sometimes finds a way to thank us. Subscribe to my channel, leave a like, and drop a comment below. For every new subscriber, I'll be donating $1 to a random act of kindness or charity. Let's make stories like this matter. Sam never planned on raising a child alone. But when his wife Emma passed away from a sudden illness, their daughter Lucy was only 2 years old. That day, everything changed. Sam buried his own grief just to keep smiling for Lucy, who had her mother's curly hair and her quiet giggle. 4 years later, they were still just the two of them, holding on. Barely. Sam used to work at a local factory on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Every Friday he'd bring home donuts and let Lucy stay up late. But one morning, just before sunrise, the factory shut its gates for good. Layoffs. Cost cutting. All the usual corporate excuses that meant nothing to a man who now had rent due in 5 days. Weeks passed, his savings shrank like ice in the sun. He canceled every non-essential thing: internet, cable, even Lucy's dance lessons, the one place where she smiled wide and forgot they were struggling. Sam skipped meals so she wouldn't have to. He tried everything: construction gigs, night shifts, dishwashing. Some paid cash, others paid nothing. But one rainy Tuesday, soaked and exhausted, he walked Lucy home from school and saw her tiny shoes full of water. That night, he promised himself he wouldn't let this keep happening. He needed a real job, now. So after tucking Lucy in and heating up leftover rice, he opened his old laptop, the one with a cracked screen, and went on a job board. He typed in cleaner, janitor, anything. His fingers were stiff, tired, and without realizing it, he clicked the wrong posting. It wasn't for a janitorial position, it was for an entry-level administrative assistant in a downtown investment firm. The description was a wall of business jargon he didn't understand, but the apply button was right there, glowing blue. So he clicked it. Mostly by accident, he didn't even know what half the words on his resume meant anymore. It had been years since he'd updated it. But he attached it anyway. Then he went to bed, thinking nothing of it. Just another failed shot in the dark. But the next morning, while packing Lucy's lunch, 2 slices of toast, a boiled egg, and an apology for no juice, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. But something made him answer. A calm voice said, "Hello, Mr. Walker, we received your application and would like to invite you in for an interview." Sam froze. Interview? For what? For the admin position at Vantage Capital. He stared at the floor, stunned. This had to be a mistake. But before he could explain, the voice continued. "Can you come in Thursday at 10 a.m.? He mumbled something that sounded like yes, then hung up, and stood there in his tiny kitchen, holding a spoon in midair, realizing that somehow he just got a callback for the wrong job. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that this so-called mistake would unlock a door he never imagined existed. And that behind that door stood a woman who had never forgotten what he did one rainy night, many years ago. Sam didn't own a suit. The closest thing he had was a slightly wrinkled button-down shirt and a tie that still had a baby spit-up stain from when Lucy was a toddler. But on Thursday morning, he ironed it anyway, brushed off his worn-out shoes, and dropped Lucy at his neighbor's apartment with a quiet promise to be back soon. He walked into the towering glass building of Vantage Capital with his heart thudding like a drum in his chest. Everything about the place screamed money. Marble floors, people in tailored suits, voices that never rose above a professional murmur. Sam stood at the front desk for a moment, unsure if he belonged here. He didn't, but he gave his name, and a receptionist with perfect posture nodded politely and led him to the elevator. When he stepped into the interview room on the 24th floor, there were already 3 people waiting: a man with thin glasses and a clipboard, a woman typing rapidly on a tablet, another guy with a forced smile and an expensive haircut. They all turned to look at him, and something about their expressions made it clear he was not what they expected. Sam sat down and forced a smile. His palms were sweating. The man with the clipboard spoke first. "Mr. Walker, Thanks for coming in. We've looked over your resume and, well, your background is a little different from our usual candidates. Sam cleared his throat. Yeah, I think I actually applied by mistake. I was looking for custodial work. Not. There was a short silence. No one laughed. No one kicked him out. The woman with the tablet looked up. Then why did you come? Sam looked down at his hands. He thought about lying, but what was the point? Because I have a 6-year-old daughter, and last week I had to choose between paying the gas bill or buying her shoes that didn't leak. I'm not here because I think I'm qualified. I'm here because I'm out of options, but I can learn. I work hard, I show up, and I don't quit, even when it's hard. The man with the glasses scribbled something on his clipboard. The others glanced at each other. No one interrupted. Sam continued. I used to work in manufacturing. Before that, I drove delivery trucks. I've never worked in an office like this. I probably can't answer half the questions you'll ask me, but I'm not lazy, and I'm not stupid. I just need someone to give me one real chance. The door opened. Everyone in the room turned. She walked in with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need announcing. Tall, confident, in a navy blue suit that fit like it was made for her. Her heels tapped softly on the floor as she approached the table. She was maybe in her early 30s, with sharp eyes and a kind of calm that made people sit up straighter. This is Clara Moore, our CEO, the man with glasses said. Sam stood automatically. Then Clara looked at him and froze. It wasn't obvious, not to the others, maybe, but Sam noticed. Her step faltered. Her eyes locked on his, searching for something. Recognition, memory. There was a long pause. 2 seconds, maybe 3. But in a room like that, it felt like forever. Clara finally spoke, her voice steady but soft. Mr. Walker, thank you for coming in. She sat down slowly, her gaze never leaving his face. Sam felt his stomach twist. Did he know her? Had they met before? Clara flipped through his resume without really reading it, then looked up again. You said you applied by mistake. Yes, ma'am. I was actually trying to apply for a janitorial position. This wasn't what I meant to click. Her eyes softened, just slightly, and yet you came anyway. He nodded. Because I've got a daughter, and nothing else lined up. I figured, why not? Couldn't get worse. Clara leaned back in her chair, studying him. There was something unreadable in her expression, something almost emotional. Well, Mr. Walker, we'll take that into consideration. She stood, closing the folder in front of her. Meeting adjourned. The others stood too, nodding politely. Sam felt the air shift, like something had just happened, though he couldn't say what. As he walked out of the office, escorted by the same receptionist, he looked back once. Clara was still standing by the table, staring at the empty chair he had just left, and deep inside, something was stirring, something from a long time ago, something she had never told anyone. Sam was already halfway to the elevator when he heard her voice behind him. Mr. Walker. Wait. He turned. Clara was standing just outside the interview room. Her face had changed. It wasn't the composed face of a CEO anymore. It was something softer, almost fragile. Do you remember me? Sam blinked, confused. I'm sorry. I don't think we've met. She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. You saved my life. 8 years ago. Outside Willow Creek, near that old gas station. He froze. I was in a car accident. It was raining. My car hit a tree. The engine caught fire. My daughter was in the back seat. Everyone drove past, but not you. Sam stared at her, speechless. You stopped. You broke the window with a tire iron, pulled me out first, then went back in for my daughter. The car was already in flames. I begged you to leave her, but you didn't. You wrapped your arms around her and crawled out just before the car exploded, and then you disappeared. He remembered now, his hands started trembling. Yeah, I remember. I was on my way to work. I was already late for a night shift. My boss had warned me. One more delay, and I was out. I didn't wait for the cops. I just left. You never gave your name. Clara smiled softly. I've been looking for you ever since. Sam leaned against the wall, the memory flooding back like it had happened yesterday. That night had haunted him. Not because of what he'd done, but because he'd never known what happened after. He remembered the little girl's screams, the smell of gasoline, the burn on his arm that never quite healed, and the guilt, not for saving them, but for leaving. He had told no one, not even his late wife. Clara took a breath. That little girl you saved. She's 11 now. Her name is Ellie. Nielli. She still has nightmares sometimes, but she's alive, because of you. Sam swallowed hard. His voice cracked. I didn't know. I thought maybe you both. We lived. Thanks to you. There was silence between them. For a moment. Then Clara continued. I was unconscious. I woke up in the hospital, and all they could tell me was that a man had pulled us out and vanished. I tried everything. News reports. Asking people, even private investigators, but I had nothing. No name. No clue. Just a burned jacket. And a memory of your voice. She laughed softly. I thought maybe I imagined you. Like a ghost. Some angel who showed up just long enough to save us. Sam shook his head slowly. I was just a guy on his way to work. Clara's voice dropped. No. You were the one person who stopped. That's not just some guy. She looked away for a second, then back at him. So when I saw you today, it was like seeing a ghost come to life. I couldn't believe it. But I knew. Sam's eyes were wet now, though he blinked quickly to hide it. And you're the girl from the car. She nodded. I lost my husband in that crash. I had no family left. Just Ellie. And if you hadn't come when you did. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Sam leaned his head back against the wall, trying to process it all. 8 years. 8 years of wondering. Of not knowing. And now, here she was. Alive, successful, and standing in front of him like a miracle. I never forgot that night. Clara whispered. Never. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. You didn't apply for the wrong job, Sam. You just didn't know what was waiting for you here. He looked down, stunned. So what now? She smiled. Now, we figure that out together. Clara looked Sam straight in the eyes, her voice steady but full of warmth. You saved me that night. Now, I want to save you. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. This is a job offer. Administrative assistant to the CEO. It's more than a job. It comes with a place to live and full medical insurance for Lucy. Sam's breath caught. He looked down at the papers in disbelief. I don't know what to say. I don't deserve this. Clara shook her head. You deserve every bit of it. You saved 2 lives, and now I want to give you a fresh start. For a few days, it felt like a dream. Sam threw himself into his new role, learning quickly, determined to repay Clara's trust. Lucy's laughter filled the small apartment. Clara arranged for them, and hope bloomed where there had only been despair. But happiness rarely comes without a price. Behind closed doors, some members of the board were stirring trouble. They whispered about Sam's past, his debts, the eviction notice he was fighting, the job he lost at the factory. They called it reckless to put a man with such baggage in a key position. One evening, Sam overheard Clara on the phone in her office. We have to stop this. Sam is a liability. Clara's voice was firm. He's not. He's a hero. Silence. Then a low growl. You're risking your career for a charity case. Sam's heart sank. He knew what this meant. The next day, Clara summoned him. There's pressure from the board. He's a shit. They're threatening to leak your financial problems to the media, to stir up a scandal. Sam swallowed hard. I never wanted any of this. I don't want to hurt you or your company. Clara's eyes glistened with tears. I won't let them win, but Sam shook his head slowly. He's a shit. 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 For you and for Lucy. That night, after putting Lucy to bed, Sam wrote a note. His hand trembled as he folded the paper. Dear Clara, thank you for everything, for seeing me when no one else did. But I can't let this ruin you. I'm walking away. Take care of Lucy. She deserves better than this mess. With gratitude, Sam. The next morning, Clara found the note on her desk, and the small apartment, empty. Panic flooded her chest. She called every number he'd given her. He's a shit. The board was already calling for a meeting, eager to celebrate Sam's resignation as a victory. But Clara wasn't ready to give up. He's a shit. Not on Sam, not on Hope. She grabbed her coat and ran out the door, determined to find him, before he gave up on himself. Clara found Sam exactly where he had first saved her 8 years ago. Sitting alone on a weathered bench in the park near the old gas station. The fading sunlight cast long shadows over the cracked pavement. His head was bowed, lost in thought. She approached slowly, her footsteps quiet but determined. Sam, she said softly, I'm glad I found you. He looked up, surprise flickering in his tired eyes. I'm sorry, Clara. I didn't want to cause you trouble. She shook her head. It's not your fault. If the company treats people like you like dirt, then maybe you were better off walking away. He sighed deeply. I thought I was protecting you and Lucy, but maybe I just ran away from my problems. Clara sat beside him, pulling her coat tighter against the evening chill. There's something you should know, Sam. Ellie, my daughter, she's not a little girl anymore. She's a teenager, and she started something while you were gone. Sam frowned. What do you mean? Clara smiled, a sparkle returning to her eyes. She launched a media campaign called My Hero. My dad doesn't know he saved me twice. Videos, posts, interviews. Ellie told the story of the night you saved her life, and how her mom never forgot. But she also told the story of the man who tried to give her family a new start. The story went viral overnight. The company was forced to respond. Public outrage grew too loud to ignore. Board members who opposed you were exposed for their greed and cruelty. 2 days later, the CEO announced a formal apology. And Sam? Clara looked at him with pride. You're being made head of the new Employee Assistance Program. It's a role created just for you to help people facing the same struggles you've overcome. Sam's eyes glistened. I never imagined any of this. Clara reached out and took his hand. You earned it, Sam. Every bit of it. Sam smiled, the weight lifting from his shoulders. Lucy would be proud. The park grew quiet as the sun disappeared behind the trees. But inside Sam, a new light was burning. A light of hope, second chances, and justice finally served. Today's story is one of the most unexpected love stories you'll ever hear. It's about a billionaire's son who fell in love with a homeless girl and gave up everything to stand by her side. Stay till the end. You won't believe what she was hiding all along. Subscribe to my channel, leave a like, and write a comment. For every new subscriber, I'll donate $1 to charity. Liam Ashford had everything. A penthouse in downtown Manhattan, a trust fund that could finance a small country, and invitations to every exclusive gala in the city. Yet at 26, he felt absolutely nothing. The champagne tasted stale. The laughter around him echoed like empty bells. Even his birthday, celebrated on a yacht with celebrities and fireworks, felt more like a performance than a party. So one morning, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses to avoid attention, he took a walk. No bodyguards, no driver. Just him and the city. He wandered into an older part of town. The sidewalks were cracked, the buildings worn. No marble lobbies here. No doormen offering polite smiles. Just silence, and the distant sound of chalk scraping pavement. He turned a corner, and saw her. She sat cross-legged on the concrete, her jeans torn but not dirty, her hair tucked into a messy braid. Around her, the sidewalk had been transformed into a patchwork of color, suns, animals, even a drawing of the New York skyline done in vivid pastel. But what caught his eye was her focus. She was drawing a girl, not a cartoon, but something real, a girl looking up at the stars, with eyes full of hope. Liam stopped a few steps away, unsure if he should interrupt. She looked up. She didn't flinch, didn't beg, didn't even seem surprised. "You lost?" she asked calmly, wiping her hands on a ragged cloth. Liam blinked. "No. Just looking." She nodded and went back to drawing. No small talk, no performance, just peace. He watched her silently for a moment. Then, without thinking, he walked to the nearest coffee shop, bought 2 lattes, and returned. "I thought you might be cold," he said, handing one to her. She looked at the cup, then at him. "Thanks. But I don't take things from strangers." Liam hesitated. "I'm Liam." She smiled faintly. "That's still a stranger." He laughed, then sat down on the curb, a few feet away. She kept drawing. He didn't talk. Minutes passed like that. A quiet rhythm, her chalk scraping, his coffee cooling. Eventually she broke the silence. "Why are you really here?" Liam thought about it. He wasn't sure himself. Then he said, "I guess I got tired of gold ceilings and fake smiles." She glanced at him, curious now. He pointed at her drawing. "That girl. She looks like she still believes in something." She stopped, then said, "Maybe she does. Maybe I used to." He didn't ask what happened. Not yet. Instead, he looked at the stars she had drawn above the chalk girl's head. "You're really good at this." She shrugged. "It's just chalk. Rain takes it away, but not before someone sees it," Liam said softly. That made her pause. He didn't know her name, didn't know why she was on the street, but something about her presence felt more real than anything he'd felt in years. And when she finally said, "You can sit there if you want. Just don't talk too much," Liam smiled. That was how it began. A billionaire's son and a girl with chalk-stained fingers under the fading sky of a forgotten street. The next day, Liam returned. Same street, same cracked pavement, but no sign of her. The drawings were gone. A light rain overnight had washed them into colorful rivers along the gutter. He walked the block twice, hoping to see a figure curled in a doorway or someone holding chalk. Nothing. He came back again the next day, and the next. On the 4th day, she was there. She sat on the same spot, not drawing this time, just reading a torn paperback with half the cover missing. Her braid was neater, her expression unreadable. Liam approached quietly, unsure if she'd remember him. "You again," she said, not looking up. "You didn't leave me much choice," he replied. "I had questions." She finally glanced at him. "Still don't have answers." He sat beside her again. Like last time, a careful distance. Not too close. The city buzzed around them, but here it felt like time slowed down. "You have a name?" he asked. "I do," she said. Then said nothing more. He waited. Eventually, she closed her book and looked at him. "Emma." "Liam. But you knew that. I remember. You wore expensive sneakers to a broken sidewalk." He smiled. "You live around here?" he asked. Emma tilted her head. "I exist around here. That's enough." There was pride in her voice, not arrogance, dignity. It was the kind of pride that doesn't ask for pity, doesn't want saving. "You ever let people help you?" Liam asked, genuinely. She looked at him a long moment. Only when they don't expect anything back. I don't. Then sit. That's help enough. He noticed her hands, chalk-stained still, but with long, delicate fingers. The kind you'd expect on a pianist, not someone living on the street. And the way she spoke, every word chosen, balanced, not the voice of someone who'd spent years in shelters or fighting to survive. So he asked, "Where'd you learn to draw like that?" She paused. "I had a tutor, a long time ago." Liam raised an eyebrow. "A tutor?" Emma stood up suddenly, brushing off her jeans. "Enough for today. I don't do interviews." She started walking away, her book tucked under her arm. Liam stood too. "Wait. I'm not trying to fix you. I just, I think you're more than this sidewalk." She turned around. "Just once. And you think I don't know that?" Then she was gone again. He didn't follow. But that night, Liam lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of his $12 million apartment. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a home. Liam couldn't stop thinking about her. Emma. There was something about the way she carried herself. Too calm, too sharp, like she wasn't really from the world she now slept in. Like she had fallen from somewhere higher. The next morning, instead of going to the office, Liam took his laptop and sat in the back of his driver's black SUV. He typed her name into every search engine he could find. Emma, chalk artist. He homeless New York. Too vague. So he tried another approach. He remembered what she said. "I had a tutor." The way she said it stuck with him. Tutors weren't for people who grew up in the system or bounced between shelters. Tutors were for the elite. For people like him. He called in a favor from an old school friend, Olivia, now working in a non-profit that tracked runaways and missing young adults. Liam described Emma. Her age. Her look. Her talent. Her tone. Olivia listened quietly. After a pause, she said, "You sure she's on the street now?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Because you might be talking about someone we stopped looking for 3 years ago." Liam felt his stomach twist. "What do you mean?" "There was a girl. Emma Caldwell. Manhattan private schools. Classical piano training. Art scholarships. Tian. Lined up for colleges. Disappeared after a family scandal. No foul play proven. But everything got sealed pretty fast. Her father was someone with power." Liam sat in silence, heart pounding. "Can you send me her photo?" 10 minutes later, his phone buzzed. It was her. "You found her," he whispered. That evening, he returned to the same sidewalk. No drawings today. But she was there again, sitting with a paper bag of something warm. She was eating slowly, eyes distant. Liam sat next to her. "You're Emma Caldwell." She didn't flinch. Didn't look surprised. Just slowly put the food aside. "You Googled me?" "I had to." "Why?" "Because I don't think you belong out here. Not like this." She looked at him, and this time there was no shield in her eyes, just tiredness. "That's the thing about belonging, Liam. It stops being yours when people decide you're inconvenient." "What happened?" She took a breath, then said, "My father was a financial advisor. Not your average one. He handled fortunes, hush money, and dirt for people who don't like sunlight. When I turned 22, I found out he used accounts in my name. Offshore. Illegal things." Liam's throat tightened. "So I confronted him," she said, her voice low. "He told me to forget it. I didn't. I went to a journalist. 2 weeks later, my apartment caught fire. They ruled it an accident. But I know better. You went underground. I had to. The moment I went public, I'd be chased by people who'd rather I disappeared. So I did. Better they think I'm just another invisible face on the street." Liam sat still. The city noise buzzed in the background. But inside him, everything had gone quiet. Why tell me this? Because you already know. And now, you're a risk to me. He looked at her. I don't care. You should. He leaned forward just slightly. I can help. She stood. Don't be a hero. Liam. Heroes die first in stories like mine. And with that, she was gone again. Swallowed by the shadows, leaving Liam alone, with a truth that had just become very, very dangerous. Liam hadn't planned on telling anyone. But secrets don't stay buried long when you live in a glass tower. It started with a phone call from his father's assistant. Your father would like to see you. Now, the tone was polite. But the urgency wasn't masked. Liam entered the Ashford Enterprises building and took the elevator to the 42nd floor. Everything smelled like success: marble floors, polished brass, filtered air. But to him it all felt hollow now. His father, Richard Ashford, waited behind a vast mahogany desk, staring out at the skyline like he owned the city. You've been spending time in the East End, Richard said without turning. So, you're being followed. And I'd like to know why. Liam didn't flinch. Because I met someone. Richard turned then, his eyes were sharp, like knives hidden in a business suit. A girl, a woman. Her name is Emma. Richard froze for half a second. That was enough. Emma Caldwell. Liam's stomach dropped. You know her. Richard exhaled slowly and walked to the minibar. Of course I do. Every man with power in this city knows her father and what she tried to do. She told me everything, Liam said. Then I suggest you forget it. No, Richard poured 2 drinks, only handed one. You think this is about love, about justice, Liam? You're playing in waters filled with sharks, and this girl, she's radioactive. She's not the one who should be hiding. You are, Richard chuckled darkly. Do you know how many lives would collapse if what she knows came out? Political careers, corporations, banks, your friends, even me. Liam stared at him. What did you do? Enough, Richard snapped. Enough that I made sure those files she leaked disappeared. Enough that I kept her alive by making her irrelevant. So you buried her? I saved her. Liam stood. I'm not afraid of them. You should be, Richard said, because they're watching you now too. That night, when Liam returned to his apartment, he found the front door ajar. Nothing was missing. But everything had been moved just slightly. His laptop screen was still warm. His phone had been placed on the table, though he always kept it in his pocket. They wanted him to know. He looked out the window and saw a black car across the street. Engine off, windows tinted. Liam picked up his coat and ran out the back. He didn't know where she was, but he needed to find her. Before they did, he found her 3 days later. She was hiding in the back of a half-collapsed warehouse near the river. He'd gone to all their old spots, the sidewalk where they first met, the alley near the bookstore, even the shelter that sometimes gave her a hot meal. Nothing. Until he saw the chalk. A single symbol, drawn low on a rusted dumpster, an open eye. She'd told him once that was her sign. Her way of saying, I'm still here. Liam followed the trail. She was curled up near a broken window, her backpack clutched to her chest, her eyes red. Emma, he whispered. She looked up. He didn't recognize the expression on her face. Part fear, part relief, part guilt. They know, he said. They broke into my place. My father threatened me. I think we're being followed. She stood, slowly. She didn't ask how he found her. I told you not to come looking. I don't care. You should. No, Emma. I really don't. I'm in this now. Whether you want me or not. She sat down heavily on a concrete beam, silent, for a moment. then pulled a small flash drive from the lining of her bag. "This is everything," she said. "The accounts, the bribes, the shell companies. It's encrypted, but not enough. They've been hunting me for this." "Let's go to the press," Liam said. "They'll kill the story," Emma replied. "Pay off editors, intimidate writers. It'll never reach the light." "Then what?" She looked up at him. "We do it ourselves. A live stream, a dump site, with backups in different countries, and we release it all at once." Liam nodded. "Let's burn them all." They worked through the night. Emma was a genius, not just in art, but in survival. She'd built layers of security, contingency plans, even automated scripts. Liam used his access to high-speed servers, old media contacts, and tools only the wealthy ever touch. By sunrise, it was done. The data was set to release at noon, to thousands of inboxes, to whistleblower sites, even to major networks, all at once. "You ready?" she asked, sitting across from him in the warehouse, laptop open. He looked at her. For the first time since they met, she wasn't running. She was standing tall. "Yeah." She pressed enter, and everything changed. Within minutes, phones across the city started buzzing. Reports flooded in. Scandals, names, amounts, offshore islands, politicians, CEOs, Ashford Enterprises. By evening, the city was on fire, metaphorically. By midnight, there were arrests. By morning, Richard Ashford was no longer in control of anything, and Emma, gone again. Liam searched, called, reached out, but she disappeared like chalk in the rain, until one day, months later, a package arrived at his door. Inside was a single photo, a seaside village in Portugal, a woman sitting in the sun, drawing children with bright colors, her braid, her eyes, her peace. No return address, just a note: "You saved me too." For weeks after the data drop, Liam lived in chaos. Reporters camped outside his building. Former friends distanced themselves. Business partners vanished overnight. His father's empire crumbled in courtrooms and headlines. But Liam didn't regret it. He'd finally done something real. When the dust settled, he moved out of the penthouse, sold the cars, shut down the trust fund. He didn't want the world built on silence anymore. He took a small apartment near Central Park, bought a second-hand bike, spent time helping out at shelters, places where Emma had once slept, hidden, survived. He got to know names, stories, patterns. The system was still broken, but now he saw it. And then came the photo. Portugal, sunlight, colors, peace. He stared at it for hours. Her handwriting, just 3 words: "You saved me too." She was alive, free, and she hadn't forgotten. Liam held on to that image like a map, back to something true. He didn't rush to find her, didn't book a flight the next day. He knew better now. Emma had rebuilt her life, not as someone's secret, or target, or scandal, but as herself. And maybe, one day when the time was right, they'd meet again. But until then, Liam kept walking, kept working, kept living a life he finally believed in. Not the one written in gold, but the one drawn slowly, in chalk, fragile, beautiful, and real. Today's story is a stunning tale of love, power, and the invisible walls that divide us. A rich girl meets a man who was only supposed to paint her walls, but ended up changing her life. Subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, and leave a comment below. For every new subscriber, I'll donate $1 to a charity that helps people rebuild their lives. The Vance estate stood like a monument to wealth: tall columns, endless lawns, imported stone from Italy. But behind its cold, perfect facade lived a girl named Clara, who felt like a stranger in her own life. At 23, Clara had never taken a train alone, never tasted street food, never been kissed without someone watching. Her world was curated: art lessons, charity events and dinner parties, where she smiled politely and said nothing real. That morning, she was sitting by the window with a book she wasn't reading, when the service gate buzzed. A white truck rolled in, dust on its wheels, and a ladder strapped to the top. From it stepped a man in jeans and a plain black shirt, holding a bucket of paint. Clara watched him approach the side entrance. There was something unbothered about the way he moved, like someone who didn't care if the world was watching or not. He rang the bell and waited, eyes scanning the vast front of the estate without a hint of awe. Mrs. Donnelly, the housekeeper, let him in and showed him to the guest lounge. Clara followed, curious. From the hallway, she peeked in. He was taller than she expected. His hands were strong, covered in dry paint from jobs before. When he turned slightly and saw her standing there, he didn't look surprised. He smiled politely. "Good morning," he said. Clara blinked. "You're the painter?" "That's right. Name's Mason. Here to take care of the lounge and the study. Should take a few days." She stepped into the room, barefoot on the cold marble. "I didn't think painters looked like you," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "I don't know. Older maybe. Less calm." He gave a short laugh. "Years of climbing ladders does that to you. You either panic or breathe through it." Mrs. Donnelly cleared her throat from behind her. Clara turned quickly and excused herself, cheeks a little warm. Throughout the day, she found excuses to pass by the lounge. He worked with quiet focus, not rushing, not performing. He didn't whistle, didn't check his phone. He simply painted brush to wall, step by step. During lunch, she lingered in the garden, just outside the open window where he was working. He noticed. "You live in a castle," he said. She smiled. "It's more like a museum with people in it." "You like it?" "Not really. It's beautiful. But it's not mine. It belongs to my father's money." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You?" He leaned on the window frame. "I belong to whatever job puts food on the table. I paint walls so my mom doesn't lose the house. That's about it." Clara stared at him. He didn't say it like a complaint. He said it like a fact. Most men who came to their home avoided eye contact or tried to impress. Mason did neither. He wasn't there to win anyone's favor. He was simply himself. That evening, at dinner, her mother mentioned the painter. "He's quite rough around the edges," she said. "I hope he won't leave stains." Clara stirred her soup without answering. That night, she found herself thinking of his hands, how steady they were, how he looked her in the eye, like they were equals, like she wasn't just another rich girl behind glass. She didn't know it yet, but something had begun, something small, something irreversible. The next few days passed quietly, but something in the air had changed. Clara found herself waking up earlier than usual. She would come down before breakfast just to pass by the lounge where Mason worked. Sometimes she brought tea she claimed was for Mrs. Donnelly, but she lingered too long. Other times, she simply stood nearby, pretending to look at old paintings or choose new curtains. But Mason noticed. "You know," he said one morning, as he taped the edges of the baseboard, "if you stare at someone painting for too long, they start to feel like a zoo animal." Clara smiled. "I'm just learning the craft." He glanced over his shoulder, planning to quit the mansion life and become a house painter. She shrugged. "Maybe. I'm not very good at being what I am." "What are you?" "Are a vase on a rich man's shelf. Pretty, silent, breakable." Mason stood up, wiping his hands on a cloth. His gaze was steady. "You don't seem breakable to me." She looked away, suddenly shy. They began to speak more after that. It started with small things, shades of beige, texture of walls, which rooms got the best light. But then came music, books, questions about dreams and disappointments. One afternoon, Clara asked him what he would do if money wasn't a problem. "Travel," he said. "See the world, not the tourist parts. The hidden places." "Why haven't you?" "Because I'm not done fixing things here. There's always something to patch, someone to help." She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. You speak like someone twice your age, and you watch me like someone looking for a way out, he replied gently. Clara's breath caught. He wasn't wrong. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not the sons of CEOs her parents introduced her to. Not her tutors, her friends, her family. Mason didn't see her wealth, he saw her restlessness. Her fear, her curiosity. It was terrifying and magnetic. That evening at dinner, her mother set down her silverware with a pointed click. "You've been spending a lot of time near that man," she said. Clara didn't look up. "His name is Mason." Her mother scoffed. "Yes, the painter, they come and go, darling. You don't make eye contact with people like that. It invites misunderstandings." Clara lifted her gaze slowly. For once, she didn't soften her voice. "Maybe I want to be misunderstood." Her father looked up from his wine. Her mother froze. "You're being childish, Clara." "Am I?" She stood, napkin falling to the floor, and walked out without a word. In her room, the chandelier shimmered above her like ice. Everything around her was polished, expensive, and lifeless. She looked out the window, and saw the soft glow from the guest lounge below. Mason was still working, still moving with that calm certainty she envied. He didn't belong to her world. But maybe, she didn't either. The next day, she brought 2 coffees down to the lounge. Mason looked up, mildly surprised. "For me? No. For the wall," she said. He chuckled and took the cup. They sat on the floor for a few moments, surrounded by drop cloths and scent of fresh paint. "I think I hate this house," she said. "Why?" "Because it never lets me feel anything real." And now, she met his eyes. "Now I do." He didn't respond. But the silence between them felt warm, not empty. There was no music, no perfume, no orchestration, just a girl with questions, and a man who never pretended to have the answers. But what they had, in that moment, was more honest than anything she had ever known. And honesty, in her world, was the rarest luxury of all. It happened on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. The air was still, the sky pale and heavy with summer heat. Clara's small white dog, Oliver, had wriggled his way out of the courtyard and slipped into the estate's vast parkland. Panic rose quickly. She called his name over and over, her voice breaking as she ran along the trimmed hedges. The dog was old, nearly blind and prone to wandering. Her parents were out. The staff didn't seem concerned, but someone did hear her. Mason dropped his brush the moment he saw her running barefoot across the lawn. "What's wrong?" he asked, already following Oliver. He ran off toward the park. "He doesn't know his way." Without a word, Mason took off in the direction she pointed. Clara stood frozen, breath caught in her chest. 15 minutes later, Mason returned. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, a streak of dirt on his cheek, but in his arms was a trembling, whimpering Oliver. He was stuck in a wire fence, Mason said, lowering the dog gently. Clara knelt down, tears streaking her cheeks. She stroked the dog's fur, then looked up at him. "You found him. I wasn't going to let you lose him." For the first time, she saw something more than calm behind his eyes. Worry, protectiveness, tenderness. Later that day, Clara found him sitting beneath a tree near the edge of the woods behind the estate. The sky had started to turn gold. She brought 2 lemonades and sat beside him, without asking. "Thank you for earlier," she said. He nodded, eyes on the horizon. "It's nothing." "No. It meant something to me." A long silence. Finally, he spoke. "My father was a banker. A big house, 3 cars, dinner parties. When I was 16, he lost everything in a bad investment. He couldn't handle the shame. Left one morning. Never came back." Clara turned her head slowly. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." I learned more mopping floors than I ever did in that big house. Learned who I was, what I'm not. She stared ahead at the swaying grass. I don't know who I am. Every part of my life is scheduled, chosen. Clothes, friends, even who I'm supposed to marry. Sounds lonely. It is. Their hands brushed as she adjusted her seat. Neither of them moved away. He glanced at her, and something passed between them. Not sudden, not dramatic, just real. I feel like I breathe differently around you, she whispered. He didn't answer with words. He leaned closer. Their lips met, not carefully, not with permission, but with hunger. The kind that builds over days of stolen looks, unfinished sentences, and what-if silences. His hand cupped her cheek. Hers pressed against his chest. For one long second, the world around them vanished. The expectations, the rules, the risk. Only they remained. Then a sound, a quiet mechanical whirring, reminded them of where they were. The garden camera, tucked discreetly near the hedge, its red light blinking. Clara pulled back. The camera. Mason sat back, breathing heavily. They stared at it. No words were needed. They both understood the consequences. Inside that kiss lived something dangerous. Not just desire, but rebellion. They had crossed a line, and someone, somewhere, had seen it. The next morning, Clara felt something shift in the air. A tension pressing against the windows, settling in the corners of the rooms. Her father was home early. That never happened. She heard his voice echoing from the study, low but sharp, the kind of tone that meant someone had done something very wrong. By noon, the house was in full lockdown. The security guards unusually alert, the maids hushed, and the staff avoiding eye contact. Clara's heart raced. Then, just after lunch, she was called into the library. Her father sat behind his massive desk, face like stone. Her mother stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. "Sit down, Clara." She obeyed slowly. "Do you want to explain this?" He tapped a remote. On the screen, the garden camera footage played. It was her and Mason. The kiss, the moment, everything. There was no sound, but the image said enough. Her face burned. "That is completely unacceptable," her father said. "Do you have any idea who that man is?" "Yes," she whispered. "His name is Mason, and he is a worker. He came here to paint a wall, not seduce my daughter." "He didn't seduce me," Clara snapped. "I kissed him because I wanted to. Because he sees me, not the version you parade around at charity galas." Her mother stepped in. "You're confused, darling. He's dangerous. These people come into our homes and take advantage of our kindness." Clara stood up. "He saved Oliver. He listens to me. He's more decent than half the men you try to introduce me to." Her father's face darkened. "Enough. I have already taken care of it." "What do you mean?" "He's gone. Gone. I fired him, and I've hired someone to look into his background. I won't have a liar under my roof." Her voice cracked. "You had him followed. He has a record, Clara. Something in his past. Not theft. Worse. I'll have the details soon." She felt like the floor tilted beneath her. "You don't even know what happened, and you've already judged him." Her father's tone dropped. Cold. And final. "You are not to leave this house. Your phone is disabled. Until I'm sure you're thinking clearly. Your freedom is a privilege, not a right." Clara stared at him, stunned. "This isn't protection. This is a prison." Her mother touched her shoulder. "You'll thank us one day." Clara pulled away. That night, she tried every exit. Locked, guards stationed. Her room monitored. Her heart pounded with panic. Not because she was trapped in the house she'd known her whole life, but because Mason was out there somewhere, and she couldn't reach him. His number no longer rang. His Instagram was deleted. His truck gone. The next morning, as the maid brought in breakfast, she found something tucked into the frame of her window. A small note. Handwritten. Folded. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Clara, I didn't want to hurt you. That was never the plan. I should have never let things go so far, but every time I saw you I forgot how the world works. I'm sorry for the chaos I brought to your life. I wish things were different. She clutched the note to her chest, eyes stinging. He was gone. No goodbye. No location. No explanation. Only silence. But something inside her, something fierce and unshakable, began to grow. They had taken everything. Now she would find out why. Clara felt the walls closing in tighter than ever. The silence left by Mason's sudden disappearance echoed louder than any argument with her parents. Determined to uncover the truth, she refused to wait passively for answers. She started digging quietly. Late at night, hidden behind the glow of her laptop, she searched public records, social media scraps, and any trace that could tell her more about Mason. The further she went, the more she realized the man she thought she knew was living a life shadowed by secrets. Her best friend Emily noticed Clara's obsession and, after persistent questioning, reluctantly handed over a piece of information Clara had not expected. It belonged to Mason's mother, a woman who lived on the outskirts of town in a small, run-down house. Clara knew she had to see for herself. Disguising herself as a volunteer from a local charity, she approached the modest home with a mixture of hope and fear. The paint was peeling, the garden unkempt, but there was a quiet dignity in the way the house stood against time. She knocked. The door creaked open slowly, revealing an older woman with weary eyes that flickered with cautious curiosity. "Hello, I'm here from the volunteer center. We're checking on the welfare of families in the area. May I come in?" The woman nodded silently and stepped aside. Inside, the small living room was sparse, but every detail told a story of struggle and resilience. Clara hesitated but then spoke from the heart. "I'm Clara. I'm looking for Mason. I want to understand him better." The woman's eyes softened. She gestured for Clara to sit. "Mason is my son. You don't know what you're getting into." Clara leaned in, urging gently, "Please, I want to know everything. Who he really is. What happened to him." The woman sighed, fingers nervously twisting a faded handkerchief. "Mason was just a boy when everything fell apart. At 17, he was caught in something he didn't do. A theft he had no part in." Clara's eyes widened. "Why?" "Because his older brother was involved. And that brother had a son to care for. A little boy who needed a father. Mason took the blame to protect him. That's why he disappeared after the incident." The woman nodded. "He spent years in juvenile detention. It broke him. But he fought to come back, to live honestly, to make a new life far away from the past." Clara's mind reeled. She saw Mason's quiet strength in a new light, his distance, his caution, his refusal to get close too quickly. "But there's a danger in digging up these things," the woman warned, her voice trembling. "My son barely escaped the shadows of his past. If you pull too hard, you might drag him back into that darkness." Clara's resolve hardened. "I have to try. For him. For us." The woman studied Clara for a long moment, then nodded. "I hope you know what you're doing." As Clara left the house, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch after her. The truth was more complicated than she imagined. But now, with the pieces beginning to fall into place, there was no turning back. Her fight wasn't just against her family's judgment anymore. It was to clear Mason's name, to break the chains of a past he never wanted, and to claim a future they both deserved. Clara found Mason on a dusty construction site at the edge of town, where he worked without proper papers, hiding from the world that wanted to crush him. The sun was low, casting a warm orange glow over the half-finished walls and scattered tools. Mason wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes dark and guarded as he noticed her approach. She stood at the gate, heart pounding, unsure if he would even speak to her after everything that had happened. Mason didn't look surprised, but his face hardened. He crossed his arms, leaning against a stack of bricks. "You shouldn't be here, Clara. You don't know what you're walking into." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I know everything now. About your past. About why you left. And I still want to be with you." He laughed bitterly, a sound full of pain. "You don't understand. The past isn't something you can just leave behind. It follows me everywhere. It's in every look, every whisper, every door that closes." Clara stepped closer, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Then let's run away. Start over somewhere no one knows us. No one judges us. We can be free." Mason's eyes flickered with a mix of fear and frustration. "I can't drag you into this mess. You don't know what it's like to live like this. Always looking over your shoulder. Always hiding. I won't let you get hurt because of me." The silence between them grew thick, the weight of the moment pressing down. "You're scared, Mason. I get that. But love isn't about running away from fear. It's about facing it together." He looked away, his jaw clenched. The fight inside him was evident, the desire to protect her clashing with the hope she sparked. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but unwavering. "If you leave now, it's not me who lost. It's you who gave up." Mason's eyes met hers, full of pain and something else. Respect, maybe even hope. For the first time he didn't look away. She held out her hand. "Come with me. Fight. With me." He hesitated, the walls he had built around himself trembling. And then slowly, he took her hand. In that moment, under the fading light, two worlds collided, a love born from struggle, and a choice that would change everything. Mason stood at the iron gates of the Vans estate, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the manicured lawns. The security guards immediately noticed him, their eyes narrowing as he walked calmly toward the front door. Word had clearly spread. Everyone was watching. Inside, Mr. Pratt Vans sat in his leather chair, sharp suit immaculate, his expression cold and unreadable. Mason's footsteps echoed in the marble foyer as he approached. "I'm here to speak with you, Mr. Vans." The older man looked up, eyebrows arching in surprise but quickly masking it with disdain. "What business does a man like you have in this house?" Mason met his gaze without flinching. "I'm here because I love Clara, and I'm not running anymore. I want to work, to fight for her, and for us." A tense silence filled the room. Mr. Vans rose abruptly, his voice hard and commanding. "You have no right to be here. I will call the police. You will be arrested for trespassing." At that moment, Clara stepped forward, her phone held firmly in her hand. "Before you do that, listen to this." He played a recording of a recent conversation with her father, his voice clear, cold, threatening Mason, warning him to stay away, and insinuating that he would ruin Mason's life if he didn't leave Clara alone. The room grew heavy with the weight of truth. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Mr. Van's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This is blackmail. Clara, you have no idea what you're doing." But the police were already on their way, summoned earlier by Mr. Vans. When they arrived, Clara handed the recording over. The officers listened carefully, their demeanor shifting from suspicion to caution. After a private conversation, the police informed Mr. Vans that without clear evidence of wrongdoing by Mason, they could not make an arrest. Any attempts to intimidate or threaten would be documented, and could lead to charges. Defeated and glaring, Mr. Vans turned on his heel and left the house, his power momentarily broken. Clara exhaled, relief flooding through her. She reached out and took Mason's hand. Outside, the estate seemed emptier than before. its grandeur overshadowed by the struggle that had just unfolded within its walls. They stood together on the steps, hands clasped tightly. The future was uncertain, but for the first time it belonged to them both.